Hello everyone. Welcome to Midnight Story Channel. I'm here to help you today. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you drift off to sleep, and I'm honored to be part of your journey. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and allow yourself to relax. Your story is about to begin. Story 1. As I lie here, shrouded in the suffocating darkness of this creaky room, the echo of footsteps pacing just beyond my door sends shivers racing down my spine. I never imagined a budget roadside inn could become the stage for the most harrowing night of my existence, but the Starlight Inn, with its peeling facade and flickering promises, has proven me devastatingly wrong. What began as a desperate search for shelter has spiraled into a waking nightmare, and every creak of the floorboards whispers that my survival hangs by a thread. It all started when my old pickup coughed its last breath on the fringes of a forgotten town in the Nebraska Panhandle, a place so small it barely clung to the map. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, and I knew I couldn't spend the night stranded on a lonely stretch of Route 26. As the twilight deepened, I spotted a neon sign stuttering in the distant Starlight Inn, vacancy its glow a frail beacon against the encroaching dark. I limped my truck into the gravel lot, the crunch of tires mingling with a growing unease. The inn was a relic, its clapboard walls chipped and weathered, weeds clawing through cracks in the pavement like skeletal fingers. But I was road-weary, my bones aching for rest, and a hot shower was a luxury I couldn't afford to refuse. The bell above the office door jangled as I stepped inside, the air thick with the acrid tang of stale tobacco and mildew. Behind the counter stood a man who looked carved from the inn's decay, his thinning hair slicked back, his face etched with a scowl that seemed permanent, as if the world had long since soured on him. "Need a room?" I asked, forcing a steadiness into my voice despite the prickle at the nape of my neck. His eyes, watery and sharp, raked over me, lingering with a weight that made my skin crawl. "Just you?" he rasped, his voice like gravel underfoot. I nodded, suddenly wishing I'd lied about traveling alone. He slid a key across the counter, its plastic tag faded to a sickly yellow. "Room 7, he said, a smirk twitching at his lips. "Hope you're lucky." As I trudged to my room, the gravel crunching beneath my boots, I felt the weight of unseen gazes boring into my back. I glanced over my shoulder, catching the twitch of a curtain in a nearby window, the movement swift and secretive. My pulse quickened, a drumbeat of unease. The room was a time capsule of neglect, dingy wallpaper curling at the seams, a sagging bed with a threadbare quilt, and a television that looked like it hadn't worked since the Reagan era. But it was a place to crash, and that was enough. I dropped my duffel on the floor and headed for the bathroom, craving the solace of a shower to wash away the day's grime. The pipes groaned in protest, spitting out a tepid trickle that barely qualified as water. As I scrubbed shampoo into my hair, a faint creak pierced the hiss of the spray, the unmistakable sound of the room's door easing open, then clicking shut. My heart lurched, a wild animal trapped in my chest. I shut off the water, the silence roaring in my ears, and strained to hear anything beyond the drip of the faucet. Nothing. I wrapped a towel around my waist, my movements slow and deliberate, and peeked out of the bathroom. The room was unchanged, my duffel untouched, the door still locked. "You're imagining things, Nora," I muttered, but the words felt hollow, a flimsy shield against the dread pooling in my gut. I dressed quickly, the damp chill of the room clinging to my skin, unable to shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. As night fell, the inn came alive with unsettling sounds, footsteps thudding in the room above, their rhythm erratic and heavy. Murmurs drifting from the parking lot, too low to decipher but charged with a menace that set my nerves alight. And every so often, a muffled thump or stifled cry from somewhere in the building, each one a needle in my fraying composure. I tried to distract myself, flipping on the ancient TV, but it spat only static, the screen a snowstorm of white noise. A tattered magazine on the nightstand offered no solace, its pages filled with ads for products long discontinued. Sleep was a distant dream, my body wired with the need to stay alert. Just as I reached for the lamp, a knock rattled the door, sharp and insistent, shattering the fragile quiet. I froze, my hand hovering, my breath caught in my throat. Who would knock at this hour, past midnight in a nowhere town? The knock came again, harder, demanding. "Hello?" I called, my voice thin and trembling, betraying the fear I tried to suppress. No answer, just another knock, slow and deliberate. Heart pounding, I crept to the door, pressing my eye to the peephole. A woman stood outside, her figure ordinary, middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair pulled into a loose knot, but her eyes were wild, glinting with a desperation that rooted me in place. "Please," she said, her voice muffled but urgent, "I need help." Let me in. Every instinct screamed to keep the door barred, to trust the unease twisting my insides. But what if she was truly in danger, stranded like me? Guilt and fear warred within me, and against my better judgment, I unhooked the chain and cracked the door open. "What's wrong?" I asked, my hand gripping the frame, ready to slam it shut. Her eyes darted, scanning the shadows behind her. "They're coming," she whispered, her words a blade of ice. "We have to leave now." Before I could react, she shoved past me, her shoulder knocking me back. I stumbled, shock giving way to alarm as she darted to the window, peering through the grimy curtains. "Who's coming?" I demanded, my voice sharper now, fear and confusion colliding. "What's happening?" She turned, her face ghostly in the dim light, her expression a mix of disbelief and pity. "You don't know?" she asked, her tone incredulous. "How long have you been here?" "I checked in a few hours ago," I said, my unease swelling. "My truck broke down." Her laugh was a jagged thing, devoid of humor. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, shaking her head, "that's how they reel you in. Your truck didn't break down by chance." A chill slithered down my spine, her words sinking like stones. "What are you talking about?" I pressed, but before she could answer, heavy footsteps echoed outside, deliberate and unhurried, stopping just beyond the door. "They're here," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. The doorknob rattled, a slow, testing turn, and I realized with horror that I hadn't relocked the door after letting her in. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and yanked me toward the bathroom. "Quick," she hissed, "we have to hide." We crammed into the tiny bathroom, the air stale with mildew, our breaths shallow and synchronized as we pressed against the tiled wall. The room's door creaked open, heavy boots thudding across the floorboards. Drawers scraped open, the mattress groaned as it was flipped, the sounds of a thorough search filling the silence. "Where are they?" a gruff voice demanded, thick with irritation. "Not here," another replied, "closer now." "Check the next room." The footsteps retreated, the door clicking shut, and I exhaled, my body trembling with the effort of staying still. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She pressed a finger to her lips, her eyes pleading for silence, then spoke, her words a hushed torrent. "This isn't just an inn," she said. "It's a snare. They target people like us, travelers, loners, folks who won't be missed. They sabotage your car, lure you in," and then she swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "They take you, sell you, kill you, use you for whatever sick games they play. I've been trying to escape for weeks." My mind reeled, struggling to grasp the horror she described. It sounded like a fevered dream, a plot ripped from a late-night thriller, but the fear in her eyes, the chaos I'd heard, the clerk's unsettling smirk, it all clicked into a terrifying mosaic. "We have to get out," I said, surprised by the steel in my voice. She nodded, her jaw set. "There's a window behind the dumpsters out back. If we can reach it, we might have a shot." We eased out of the bathroom. The room erect drawers yanked open, the mattress askew, evidence of their ruthless search. We crept to the door, pressing our ears against the wood, listening for any hint of movement. The silence was deafening, a fragile shield. We slipped into the night, the neon signs buzz a mocking hum in the stillness. Sticking to the shadows, we edged along the inn's perimeter, the gravel biting into my soles, the air heavy with the scent of diesel and decay. The dumpsters loomed ahead, their rusted bulk shielding a small window, its frame warped but promising freedom. Just as we reached it, a shout pierced the dark. "There they are!" We sprinted, no longer caring about stealth, our breaths ragged. She reached the window first, wrestling with its stubborn frame, her hands trembling. I glanced back, my heart lurching. 3 men charged toward us, their faces twisted with fury, their boots pounding the gravel. With a groan, the window gave way, and she scrambled through, turning to haul me up. I was halfway out when a hand clamped around my ankle, iron tight. I kicked wildly, my heel connecting with bone, and the grip loosened. I tumbled onto the grass outside, pain flaring but ignored. We ran into the woods behind the inn, branches lashing our faces, the underbrush tearing at our legs. The men's shouts grew fainter, their flashlight beams slicing through the trees but losing ground. We didn't stop, driven by the primal need to survive, the forest a labyrinth of shadow and sound. Hours bled into eternity, our lungs burning, our bodies pushed beyond endurance. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and ambers, we stumbled onto a county road, the asphalt a lifeline. She turned to me, her face etched with exhaustion but alive with a weary triumph. "I'm Ellen," she said, offering a faint smile. "Clara," I replied, my voice raw, the weight of our escape settling in. "Thank you, Clara," she said softly. "I wouldn't have made it without you." I nodded, words failing me, the sunrise a fragile promise of safety. The starlight faded into the distance, its neon glow a memory I'd never escape. We flagged down a passing truck, its driver wary but kind, and as we rode toward town, I knew the horrors of that night would haunt me forever. The road stretched ahead, uncertain but free, and I clung to the truth that we'd survived together, against all odds. Story 2. The neon glow of Mama Rosa's pizzeria faded in my rearview mirror as I pulled away, the scent of marinara and mozzarella lingering in my beat-up hatchback like a comforting ghost. I had no inkling that this routine delivery, just another order in a slow Tuesday night's grind, would drag me into a vortex of terror I couldn't have conjured in my darkest dreams. Sometimes, the most innocuous journeys carrying a steaming pizza to a quiet suburb can spiral into nightmares that cling to you long after the last slice is gone. It was a sluggish evening in the sleepy college town of Millfield, Ohio, the kind where the clock seemed to mock me with every tick. I'd been slinging pizzas for Mama Rosa's for nearly a year, a gig that paid the rent while I pieced together my art degree. The delivery app pinged just as I was ready to call it quits, a last-minute order to a house on the edge of town, where the street lights dwindled and the roads turned to gravel. Any extra cash was a lifeline with bills looming, so I grabbed the insulated bag, the pizza's warmth seeping through, and headed out, humming to a lo-fi playlist as my headlights carved through the autumn dark. The GPS led me down a winding lane, the houses growing sparse, their lawns swallowed by overgrown hedges and skeletal trees. The address 47 Old Quarry Road was unfamiliar, tucked in a part of Millfield I rarely ventured, where the glow of civilization felt like a distant memory. As I turned onto a narrow driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires, the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches clawing at the sky like gnarled hands. At the end stood a house, if you could call it that, a sagging, two-story relic with boarded windows and paint peeling like old skin. A single bulb flickered above the porch, casting jagged shadows that danced across the warped boards. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the chirp of crickets and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. I grabbed the pizza box, its heat a small comfort against the chill creeping up my spine, and approached the porch, my sneakers scuffing on the uneven path. The air was thick with a scent of damp wood and something sour, like forgotten compost. I knocked, the sound swallowed by the house's looming bulk. For a long moment, nothing stirred. I raised my fist to knock again when slow, shuffling footsteps echoed inside, each one deliberate, like a predator stalking prey. The door creaked open, revealing a man who looked like he'd been carved from despair, tall and gaunt, with a tangle of unkempt hair and a beard that seemed to grow wild from neglect. His eyes, sunken deep in their sockets, fixed on me with a feverish intensity that made my skin prickle. "Pizza delivery," I stammered, holding out the box, my forced smile faltering under his gaze. His face split into a grin, revealing teeth stained yellow and crooked, a smile that was more grimace than welcome. Yes, he rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Come in. I'll grab your money." Every instinct screamed to stay put, to hand over the pizza and bowl, but the promise of a tip and the nagging fear of seeming rude propelled me forward. I stepped inside, the door thudding shut behind me with a finality that set my nerves alight. The house was a labyrinth of decay, the air heavy with the stench of mildew and stale smoke. Piles of yellowed newspapers teetered against walls papered in faded florals, and furniture sagged under the weight of years, its upholstery frayed and stained. The dim light from a single lamp cast long shadows, making the room feel like a stage for some unspeakable drama. "Just wait here," the man said, disappearing through a doorway, his footsteps fading into the house's depths. I stood in the entryway, clutching the pizza box, my eyes darting to the cluttered chaos around me. Faded photographs lined one wall, their subjects' faces blurred by time, their eyes seeming to follow me with silent accusation. On a nearby table, a stack of newspaper clippings caught my attention, their headlines screaming of missing persons, locals, travelers, all vanished without a trace. My pulse quickened, a drumbeat of dread. This wasn't right. I shifted my weight, the floorboards creaking beneath me, when the man returned not with cash, but with a pistol, its barrel glinting in the lamplight. My heart lurched, the pizza box slipping from my hands to land with a dull thud. "Now," he said, his tone eerily calm, as if discussing the weather, "you're going to do exactly as I say." I raised my hands, palms out, my voice trembling but steady. "Look, man, I don't want trouble. Take my wallet, the car, whatever. Just let me go." He laughed, a grating sound that scraped against my nerves. "Oh, it's not about money, kid," he said, his eyes gleaming with a manic fervor. "You're going to help me with something far more important." He gestured with the gun, motioning me deeper into the house. My mind raced, searching for an escape, but the gun's cold promise kept me moving. We passed through a kitchen that reeked of neglect, dirty dishes piled in the sink, their surfaces crusted with something dark and unidentifiable. He led me to a room that looked like a study, its walls lined with sagging bookshelves stuffed with dusty tomes and glass jars filled with murky shapes I didn't dare examine. A cluttered desk dominated the space, strewn with papers, wires, and strange devices that hummed faintly, their purpose a mystery. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to a rickety chair in the corner. I sank into it, my legs like jelly, my eyes locked on the gun. "What do you want?" I asked, hating the quiver in my voice. His grin widened, a predator savoring his catch. "You, my friend, are going to help me settle a score," he said, his words dripping with venom. "The owner of that pizzeria, Mama Rosa, she destroyed my life." He launched into a rambling tirade, his voice rising with each word. Rosa, he claimed, had swindled him out of his savings, sabotaged his business, and driven his family to ruin. Spittle flew from his lips, his gestures wild, the gun waving dangerously as he recounted a litany of imagined wrongs. I listened, horror mounting, realizing I was in the grip of a man unhinged, his reality warped by obsession and rage. "This isn't about Rosa," he concluded, leaning close, his breath sour and hot. "It's about justice. You're going to call her, tell her your car's broken down out here, and when she comes," he drew a finger across his throat, his grin a grotesque caricature. My stomach churned, bile rising. He wanted me to lure my boss to her death, to make me complicit in his twisted revenge. "I can't do that," I stammered, my voice cracking. "Please, let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear." His face darkened, the gun pressing closer. "You don't have a choice, boy," he growled. "Do it, or you'll never leave this house alive." He shoved an old flip phone into my hands, its screen cracked but glowing. My fingers trembled as I dialed Rosa's number, praying she wouldn't pick up, that the call would fail. But after 3 rings, her familiar voice answered, warm but tired. "Hello?" I swallowed hard, the gun's cold barrel grazing my temple. "Hey, Rosa, it's Leo," I said, my voice shaking. "I ran into car trouble out on Old Quarry Road. Can you come help me out?" There was a pause, and for a fleeting moment, I hoped she'd sense something was wrong, refuse to come. But then she sighed. "All right, Leo, hang tight. I'll be there in about 20 minutes." The call ended, and the man snatched the phone, cackling with a glee that turned my blood to ice. Perfect, he crowed, pacing the room, his eyes alight with triumph. Now we wait. The next 20 minutes were an eternity, each second a weight crushing my chest. He muttered to himself, his words a jumbled litany of vengeance, pausing only to peer out the grimy window, his gun never straying far from my direction. I sat frozen, my mind racing for a way out, every scenario ending in the gun's cold promise. The house seemed to close in, its shadows pulsing with malice, the air thick with the weight of his madness. The growl of an approaching engine snapped me back to reality. Headlights swept across the window, and the man's excitement became palpable, his pacing frantic. "It's time," he hissed, yanking me to my feet, the gun jabbing my ribs. "One wrong move, and you're done." He dragged me to the front door, positioning me in the open while he hid behind the frame, the gun's barrel a constant threat. "Leo!" Rose's voice called from the driveway, laced with confusion. "You out here, kid?" I opened my mouth, but fear choked my words. The man jabbed me harder, and I managed a weak croak. "Over here, Rosa." She approached, her silhouette growing in the porch light, her face etched with concern. Rosa was a good boss, tough but fair, always slipping me an extra slice when the night was slow. Whatever grudge this man held, I knew it was a delusion, a fiction born of a broken mind. As she reached the porch, her eyes narrowed, sensing the wrongness. I couldn't let her walk into this trap. With a surge of adrenaline, I acted, shoving backward with all my strength. The man stumbled, caught off guard, and we crashed to the floor, a tangle of limbs and curses. The gun skittered across the boards, out of reach. "Run, Rosa!" I yelled, grappling to keep him pinned, my hands slick with pizza grease. "Call the cops." Rosa didn't hesitate, her boots pounding as she sprinted back to her truck, the gun now in her hand, her voice steady as she trained it on the man. "What the hell's going on, Leo?" she demanded, her eyes blazing. The man beneath me went limp, his fight draining as he realized the game was up. He began to sob, great heaving cries that shook his frame, his delusion crumbling under the weight of reality. "They took everything," he wailed, his words incoherent, a litany of imagined betrayals. Rosa kept the gun steady, her phone already to her ear, calling for help. The police arrived in a blaze of sirens, their lights painting the night in red and blue. They cuffed the man, his sobs fading as they led him away, his madness no match for the law's cold efficiency. Rosa sat beside me on the porch steps, her hand heavy on my shoulder. "You okay, kid?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. I nodded, though my body trembled, the adrenaline ebbing to reveal a bone-deep exhaustion. "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "But I think I'm done with deliveries for a while." She chuckled, a warm sound that cut through the night's chill. "You've earned a break and a raise. Hell, maybe a medal." As we watched the police cars pull away, the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale glow across the dilapidated house. The pizza lay forgotten on the floor, its contents smeared across the chaos, a relic of the night's terror. Rosa drove me back to town, the silence between us heavy but comforting, a shared understanding of what we'd survived. The ordeal had shown me a darkness I hadn't known existed, lurking behind the mundane facade of a delivery run. But it had also revealed a strength I hadn't realized I possessed, a resilience forged in the crucible of fear. I kept my job at Mama Rosa's, though the sight of Old Quarry Road still sent a shiver down my spine. Each delivery was a reminder of that night, a testament to the fragility of routine and the courage it took to face the unknown. The man's face, twisted with madness, haunted my dreams, but Rosa's steady presence, her unwavering trust, grounded me. I'd walked into a nightmare and come out the other side, and that, I realized, was a victory no one could take away. Story 3: The snap of a twig beneath my boot reverberated through the Blue Ridge Mountains like a warning shot, a sound that shattered the serene illusion of my solitary hike. As I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears, I glimpsed them dark silhouettes weaving through the pines, their movements too deliberate, too predatory to be mere hikers. In that heart-stopping moment, I realized my peaceful retreat had morphed into a desperate fight for survival, and the forest, once a sanctuary, was now a labyrinth of unseen threats. It was meant to be a soul-cleansing escape, a weekend to shed the weight of my desk job's relentless grind. My therapist had urged me to reconnect with nature, her voice a soothing balm. The wilderness will ground you, Elise. It'll melt your stress away. I'd chosen the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, their rolling trails and emerald vistas a siren call to my weary spirit. I'd packed meticulously trail mix, water, a compass, a map marked with careful precision and set out at dawn, my hiking boots crunching on the dew-kissed path. The morning was a symphony of beauty, sunlight filtering through a canopy of oak and hickory, the air crisp with the scent of pine and loamy earth, the chatter of birds a chorus that lifted my soul. With each step, the knots in my shoulders loosened, the rhythm of the trail a meditation that dulled the edges of my anxiety. I'd veered off the main path around noon, drawn by the distant gurgle of a stream, its promise of crystal clear water too tempting to resist. I found it nestled in a grove of ferns, its surface sparkling like polished glass as it danced over smooth stones. I knelt to refill my bottle, savoring the water's icy bite, a stark contrast to the city's chlorinated tap. As I shouldered my pack and continued, a faint murmur reached my ears, voices, human but hushed, carried on the breeze. A twinge of disappointment pricked me. I cherished the solitude, the sense of being the only soul for miles. But I reminded myself that others had as much right to these trails, and I pressed on, expecting to either pass a chatty group or reclaim my isolation as they moved away. That expectation crumbled when I rounded a bend and stumbled upon a scene that stopped me cold. In a secluded clearing, half hidden by a thicket of laurel, stood a cluster of men, not hikers, not rangers, but figures clad in dark, utilitarian clothing, their postures tense and purposeful. They were gathered around a sprawl of wooden crates, dozens of them, one pried open to reveal tightly wrapped packages, their brown paper glinting dully in the dappled light. My breath caught, my mind scrambling to make sense of the tableau. This deep in the wilderness, far from any road, these weren't supplies for a campout. Drugs, weapons, something illegal. The realization hit like a punch, my pulse spiking as I understood I'd witnessed a secret I was never meant to see. I took a cautious step back, my boots sinking into the soft earth, intent on retreating before they noticed me. But fate betrayed me. My heel landed on a dry branch, and the crack echoed through the clearing, sharp and unmistakable, a gunshot in the forest's hush. The men's heads snapped toward me, their eyes locking onto mine in a frozen tableau of mutual shock. For a heartbeat, time held its breath, the air thick with the weight of my mistake. Then one shouted, a harsh bark that shattered the stillness, and they surged toward me, their movements swift and coordinated, like wolves scenting blood. I didn't think I ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches snapping against my face, my pack bouncing painfully against my spine. The forest, once a haven, became a gauntlet, its roots and vines conspiring to trip me with every stride. Behind me, their shouts echoed, a relentless chorus of pursuit, never fading entirely despite my desperate pace. My lungs burned, each breath a fire in my chest, but terror was a merciless driver, pushing me beyond exhaustion. The trail was gone, swallowed by the wild, and I ran blindly, driven by the primal need to escape, my compass and map useless in the chaos. Time blurred, minutes stretching into hours, the forest a green haze of fear and motion. My legs trembled, threatening to buckle, when I spotted a dense thicket of brambles, its thorns a jagged promise of cover. Without hesitation, I dove in, ignoring the barbs that tore at my arms and snagged my clothes. I burrowed deep, curling into a ball, my ragged breathing a roar in my ears. I strained to listen, the forest's sounds now a cacophony, my own heartbeat, the rustle of leaves, the distant snap of twigs. Then, voices, closer now, gruff and laced with frustration. "He couldn't have gone far," one growled, his words slicing through the dusk. "Spread out," another commanded. "He's here somewhere." I pressed myself lower, the earth's damp chill seeping through my jacket, my body trembling with the effort to stay still. Their footsteps crunched closer, leaves crackling under heavy boots. A beam of light, a flashlight, swept over the thicket, grazing the edges of my hiding spot. I closed my eyes, as if darkness could shield me, my breath a shallow whisper. "Check those bushes," a voice said, alarmingly near, and I tensed, ready to bolt despite the futility. My muscles coiled, my heart a frantic drum, when a new sound pierced the air, a shrill, electronic wail, like an alarm cutting through the forest's hush. One of the men cursed, his voice sharp with irritation. "It's the perimeter sensor," he said. "Someone else is out here." "We need to secure the shipment," another replied, urgency tightening his tone. "This one'll have to wait." Their footsteps retreated, hurried now, fading into the distance as they raced back to their camp. I remained frozen, afraid to trust the silence, my body aching from the thorn's bite and the strain of stillness. The forest grew darker, twilight surrendering to night, and I waited, counting my breaths, each one a victory against the terror that threatened to consume me. As the adrenaline ebbed, the weight of my predicament settled in like a stone. I was lost, deep in the Blue Ridge, hunted by men whose operation I'd unwittingly exposed. My map was useless, my phone a brick without signal, and every shadow seemed to pulse with their return. But I couldn't stay here, a sitting target in a thorn-choked grave. Slowly, painfully, I crawled from the thicket, my skin stinging from a lattice of scratches, my clothes torn and damp. I stood on wobbly legs, the forest transformed into a realm of menace, its once familiar shapes now looming monsters in the moonlight. I picked a direction, hoping it led away from the clearing, and began to walk, moving with a stealth born of fear. Every sound, a hoot, a rustle, sent my heart racing, my body poised to dive for cover. The crack of a branch in the distance had me crouching behind a fallen log, my breath hitching as I waited for pursuit, only to realize it was likely a deer or raccoon. The forest was alive, indifferent to my plight, its beauty now a cruel facade hiding the danger I'd uncovered. I walked through the night, the stars my only guide, their cold light filtering through the canopy in fleeting patches. Just as despair began to tighten its grip, a glimmer of light pierced the darkness, not the harsh glare of a flashlight, but the warm, steady glow of windows. My heart leapt, a fragile spark of hope igniting. I quickened my pace, the light resolving into a cluster of cabins, their log walls bathed in the soft radiance of porch lamps. A campground, perhaps, or a ranger outpost. Civilization, safety. I burst from the tree line, my clothes ragged, my face streaked with dirt and blood, probably looking like a specter spat out by the wild. A couple sat by a campfire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They startled at my approach, the man rising, his hand hovering near a pocket knife on his belt. "Please," I gasped, my voice hoarse from exertion, "I need help. There are men in the woods, dangerous men. We need to call the police." The woman, her eyes wide but kind, stood and approached, her voice gentle. "You're safe now," she said, guiding me to a bench. "What happened?" Between heaving breaths, I spilled my story, the voices, the crates, the chase, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush. The couple, Tom and Ellen, were a lifeline in the chaos. Ellen fetched a blanket and a bottle of water, wrapping the wool around my shoulders as Tom dialed 911 on a satellite phone, his voice steady as he relayed my account. "We're at Willow Creek Camp," he told the operator. "Got a hiker here, says she stumbled onto an armed camp. Send help fast." They sat with me, their presence a bulwark against the terror still clawing at my edges, as we waited for the authorities. The campfire's warmth seeped into my bones, a stark contrast to the forest's chill, but my eyes kept darting to the tree line, half expecting the men to emerge, their rifles gleaming. The police arrived with a blaze of lights, their questions sharp but methodical. I recounted every detail, the clearing, the crates, the men's voices, my voice steadier now, fueled by the need to expose what I'd seen. The ranger who took my statement nodded grimly, his pen scratching across a notepad. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in these parts," he said, "but nothing this concrete. You've given us a solid lead." As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of rose and amber, an officer approached, his face weary but resolute. "We found the clearing," he said. "Signs of recent activity, tire tracks, a few wrappers, but they're gone. Looks like a major smuggling operation, probably drugs. We'll keep searching." Tom and Ellen offered to drive me back to my car, their kindness a beacon in the aftermath. As we wound through the mountain roads, the forest's beauty reemerged, its menace dulled by the morning light, but I knew I'd never see it the same way again. The Blue Ridge had revealed a darkness I hadn't imagined, a shadow lurking beneath its emerald facade. The police continued their investigation, but the men and their crates had vanished, ghosts in the wilderness, leaving only questions and the echo of my fear. The experience reshaped me, etching caution into my bones. My therapist's advice had led me to nature's embrace, but the forest had given me a new kind of anxiety, a wariness of the unseen threats that lurk in even the most picturesque places. Yet it also forged a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a resilience born of survival. I returned to the trails eventually, but never alone, always with a friend and a plan shared with someone waiting. The Blue Ridge still called, its beauty undimmed, but now I walked with eyes wide open, knowing that the wilderness holds both wonder and peril, and that sometimes, the greatest danger is the one you never see coming. Story 4. The crackle of our campfire was abruptly swallowed by a sound that turned my blood to ice, a sharp, metallic click, unmistakable as the cocking of a rifle. As I spun around, my heart lurching, they emerged from the shadows, their eyes glinting with a malice that pierced the night. In that gut-wrenching moment, I realized our idyllic family camping trip had become a desperate battle for survival, and the wilderness, once a canvas of joy, was now a deadly arena where my wife and children's lives hung in the balance. It was supposed to be the perfect retreat, a chance to weave memories with my family in the untamed beauty of Oregon's Cascade Range. My wife, Emily, and I had spent months planning this adventure, eager to share our love of the outdoors with our kids, Ava, 11, and Noah, 8. They were finally old enough to embrace the wild, to trade screens for starlight, and we chose a remote clearing in Blackthorn Valley, far from the crowded campgrounds and tourist traps. "It'll be an epic journey," I told them, my voice brimming with enthusiasm, unaware of how prophetic and chilling those words would prove. The first 2 days were a dream woven from nature's finest threads. We hiked through forests of towering Douglas firs, their needles carpeting the earth in a soft, fragrant blanket. We marveled at streams so clear they mirrored the sky, their waters cold and sweet against our lips. Evenings were spent around the campfire, roasting marshmallows until they were golden and gooey, the kids' laughter mingling with the pop of burning logs. Ava, ever curious, peppered me with questions about the flora and fauna, her notebook filling with sketches of ferns and chipmunks. Noah delighted in collecting pinnacones, each one a treasure to be proudly displayed. Emily and I exchanged quiet smiles, our hands brushing in the firelight, certain we'd made the right choice to unplug and reconnect. On the third day, we decided to push deeper into the wilderness, lured by a valley I'd spotted on our topographic map, a secluded basin cradled by rugged cliffs, promising vistas that would steal our breath. We packed for an overnight stay, our backpacks stuffed with sleeping bags, food, and a first aid kit, planning to camp by a lake and return the next morning. The hike was strenuous, the trail winding through rocky outcrops and dense underbrush, but the kids' grumbles faded when we reached the valley. It was a paradise sculpted by time, a sapphire lake reflecting the pines, its shores fringed with wild flowers, the air alive with the hum of dragonflies. We set up camp, and while Emily and Noah searched for the perfect skipping stones, Ava and I tried our luck fishing, our laughter echoing across the water. As dusk settled, painting the sky in hues of violet and amber, we gathered around the campfire, our bodies pleasantly weary, our spirits high. The lake mirrored the first stars, a tranquil backdrop to our contentment. Then, a rustle in the bushes too heavy for a raccoon, too deliberate for the wind, shattered the peace. Emily stiffened, her eyes scanning the tree line, her hand tightening on Noah's shoulder. Before I could speak, they appeared, 3 men stepping into the firelight, their presence a violation of our sanctuary. They weren't hikers or rangers. Their clothes were tattered, their beards unkempt, but it was their eyes that chilled me, cold, predatory, gleaming with a hostility that made my skin crawl. Well, the tallest drawled, his voice a slow, menacing drip, his lips curling into a sneer. "Look what we've got here, city folks trespassing in our domain." I stood slowly, positioning myself between my family and the intruders, my hands raised in a placating gesture. "We didn't know this area was restricted," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, though fear coiled in my gut. "We'll pack up at first light and head out. No trouble here." The man's laugh was a harsh bark, echoing off the cliffs. "Oh, I don't think so," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You've wandered into our territory, and we don't take kindly to outsiders." The click of the rifle being cocked cut through the night, its barrel glinting in the firelight, aimed at my chest. My mind raced, a frantic search for a way out, but the men's stances spread out, blocking our path, screamed control, calculation. Emily pulled Ava and Noah close, her face pale but resolute, her eyes locked on mine, a silent plea for a plan. "Look," I said, my voice trembling but firm, "we don't want trouble. We've got some cash, camping gear, take it, just let us go." The man with the rifle stepped forward, his grin a twisted thing. "Ain't about money," he growled. "This land's ours, been ours for generations. Trespassers get dealt with our way." His words landed like a blow, their implication clear: these weren't thieves or opportunists. They were zealots, guardians of some twisted legacy, and we were their latest prey. Their eyes gleamed with a sick excitement, like predators toying with a kill. A primal instinct surged within me, drowning out fear with a fierce need to protect my family. "Run!" I shouted, seizing a burning log from the fire, its heat searing my palm. I hurled it at the rifleman, sparks exploding as it struck his chest. Chaos erupted. Emily scooped up Noah, Ava sprinting beside her as they bolted for the trees. I dove to the side as a gunshot cracked, the bullet whistling past my ear, splintering a nearby trunk. We plunged into the forest, branches lashing our faces, the underbrush snagging our clothes. The men's shouts echoed behind us, a relentless chorus of rage, their footsteps crashing through the foliage. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but terror drove me forward, Emily and the kids just ahead, their silhouettes flickering in the moonlight. "This way," I gasped, veering right, my memory of the map guiding me toward rougher terrain, a rocky slope where we might lose them. We stumbled through a shallow creek, its icy water shocking my senses, Noah's soft sobs muffled against Emily's shoulder. Ava's breath came in ragged gasps, but her face was set with determination, a mirror of her mother's resolve. The pursuit seemed to falter, their shouts growing fainter, but then a cry pierced the dark. Ava, sprawled on the ground, clutching her ankle. I tripped, she whimpered, trying to stand but collapsing with a wince. My heart sank. We couldn't leave her, but stopping was suicide. The men's voices were closing in, their flashlight beams slicing through the trees. "I'll carry her," I said to Emily, my voice urgent. "Take Noah and head for the ravine we saw earlier. Hide there and wait." Emily's eyes widened, fear warring with trust. "Matt, we can't split up," she pleaded, but I shook my head. "No choice," I said, already lifting Ava onto my back, her arms tight around my neck. "Go. We'll be right behind you." With a final, anguished look, Emily turned, Noah clinging to her, and vanished into the shadows. I adjusted Ava's weight, her small body trembling, and set off, my pace hampered but relentless. A shout rang out too close, followed by a gunshot that splintered a tree just inches away. Ava buried her face in my shoulder, her sobs silent but shaking. I spotted a dense thicket of blackberry bushes, their thorns a jagged fortress, and made a split-second choice. "Hold tight," I whispered, plunging into the brambles, the thorns tearing at my skin as I burrowed deep, shielding Ava with my body. We lay there, the earth's damp chill seeping through my clothes, our breaths shallow as the men's footsteps drew near. Their voices were sharp with frustration, their beams sweeping the underbrush. "Where'd they go?" One growled, his boots crunching just feet away. "The girl was limping," another said. "They're close." I tightened my arms around Ava, willing her to stay silent, my own fear a living thing clawing at my chest. The thorns bit into my skin, but I didn't flinch, every sense attuned to the men's movements. For an eternity, we remained still, the forest's night sounds, crickets, whined a fragile cover for our hiding place. Finally, their voices faded, their beams retreating as they moved on, convinced we'd slipped their grasp. I waited, counting heartbeats, before easing Ava from the thicket, her face pale but brave. "You okay, kiddo?" I whispered, brushing leaves from her hair. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "Dad, who are they? Why are they after us?" I wanted to shield her from the truth, but honesty was all I had. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But we're going to find Mom and Noah, and we're getting out of here." We set off, moving cautiously, the forest a maze of shadows and half-remembered landmarks. My map was back at the campsite, useless now, but I recalled the ravine's location from our hike, a narrow gash in the earth, a mile north. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sent my heart racing, but gradually, I recognized a crooked pine from earlier, its branches a signpost in the dark. As we neared the ravine, a faint whisper reached my ears. "Matt? Ava?" Relief flooded me as Emily and Noah emerged from behind a boulder, their faces etched with fear but alive with hope. We embraced, a fierce tangle of limbs, the kids' warmth a lifeline against the night's terror. But we weren't safe yet. The men were still out there, their rifles a promise of death. "There's a ranger station about 10 miles west," I said, my voice low, piecing together fragments of the map. "If we can reach it, we'll be okay." It was a daunting trek, especially with Ava's injury and our dwindling strength. But the alternative, waiting for the men to find us, was unthinkable. Emily nodded, her hand squeezing mine, her resolve a mirror of my own. As dawn's first light filtered through the trees, we set out, the forest's beauty now a cruel mask for its dangers. Ava limped, supported between us, while Noah clung to Emily's hand, his small face set with a courage that broke my heart. The trail was treacherous, the ground uneven, but we pressed on, driven by the need to survive. The men's shouts had faded, but I couldn't shake the fear that they were circling, waiting to strike. Every shadow was a threat, every sound a potential ambush, but hope, the ranger station, the promise of safety, kept us moving. Hours later, the faint outline of a log building emerged through the trees, its windows glowing with the promise of refuge. We stumbled into the clearing, our bodies spent, and pounded on the door. A ranger answered, his face shifting from surprise to concern as he took in our ragged state. "We need help," I gasped, the words spilling out. "The men, the rifles, the chase." He ushered us inside, his radio crackling as he called for backup, his voice steady but urgent. We collapsed in the station's warmth, the kids huddled in blankets, Emily's hand never leaving mine. The ranger, a grizzled man named Holt, listened as we recounted our ordeal, his pen scratching across a notepad. "Sounds like the Callahan clan," he said, his face grim. "They're a rough bunch, been terrorizing these parts for years, claiming the valley as their own. You're lucky to be alive." The police arrived, their questions thorough, their faces hardening as they confirmed the Callahans' reputation. A search party was dispatched, but the men had vanished, their camp stripped, leaving only traces of their present shell casings, a torn map. We survived, but Blackthorn Valley had left its mark, a scar on our family soul. The kids' laughter, once so free, was quieter now, their eyes scanning the shadows. Emily and I held each other tighter, our love fortified by the crucible we'd endured. We returned to the city, but the wilderness's call was tainted, its beauty forever laced with fear. I made a vow: no more remote retreats, no more gambles with our safety. The ranger station had been our salvation, Holt's quick action a lifeline, but the memory of those GLPRI and the firelight, their glint a promise of death, would haunt us forever. We were alive, together, and that was enough, an adventure we'd never forget, a testament to our strength. A bond forged in the heart of Blackthorn Valley's terror. Story 5. The moment I eased my sedan onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires, and saw his silhouette in the headlights, thumb outstretched, backpack slung low, I felt a flicker of doubt, a whisper urging me to keep driving. But pity, or perhaps a reckless curiosity, made me pause, and that single choice plunged me into a nightmare I could never have foreseen. What began as a fleeting act of kindness on a desolate Wyoming highway became a high-stakes game of survival, where the stranger in my passenger seat was no mere drifter, but a key to a deadly conspiracy that now had me in its crosshairs. It had been a grueling day behind the wheel, the kind that left my eyes gritty and my thoughts sluggish. I was returning from a trade show in Denver, my trunk stuffed with samples and my mind heavy with the prospect of another week at my sales job. The lonely stretches of Highway 287 were my only company, their endless blacktop broken by the occasional flash of oncoming headlights or the mournful wail of a distant train. The radio sputtered between classic rock and late-night talk shows, its static a companion to the monotony. As I rounded a bend, my headlights snagged on a lone figure by the roadside, tall and wiry, his thumb jutting out in the universal plea of a hitchhiker. I'd passed countless hitchhikers before, their faces blurring into the highway's rhythm, but something about this one gave me pause. Maybe it was the hour past midnight, the world cloaked in a velvet dark, or the isolation, miles from any town or rest stop. He looked vulnerable, his jacket too thin for the biting Wyoming chill, his posture hunched against the wind. Guilt tugged at me. What kind of person leaves someone stranded in this emptiness? I slowed, pulling onto the shoulder, the gravel's crunch a stark counterpoint to the radio's hum. Rolling down the passenger window a crack, I leaned over. "Where you headed?" I asked, my voice rough from hours of silence. "Just up the road a bit," he replied, his tone soft but steady, his face half-shadowed as he approached. Up close, he was in his mid-30s, with a scruffy beard and eyes that seemed to pierce through the dimness, intense yet guarded. "Car broke down a few miles back. Need to get to Rollins." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door lock, every instinct urging caution. But the rational part of me, the part that hated seeming callous, won out. Rollins was only 30 miles away, a quick detour. "Hop in," I said, unlocking the door. "I can take you that far." He slid into the passenger seat, his backpack nestled between his knees, the faint scent of cigarette smoke and leather trailing him. "Thanks," he said, offering a tight smile. "I'm Caleb." "Tom," I replied, pulling back onto the highway, the engine's hum filling the awkward silence. We drove for a few minutes, the road unspooling before us, flanked by sagebrush and the occasional silhouette of a wind turbine against the starry sky. I tried to ease the tension with small talk. "So, what happened to your car?" I asked, glancing at him. Caleb shrugged, his eyes fixed on the road. "Engine trouble. Been acting up for a while." His voice was flat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, knuckles pale. "Tough break," I said, sensing his reluctance to elaborate. "Mechanic in Rollins should sort you out." He nodded, but the silence that followed was heavier, charged with an unease I couldn't pinpoint. I stole glances at him, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked to the side mirror, as if expecting something or someone to appear. The quiet stretched, the radio's static a grating backdrop, until Caleb broke it. "Mind if we hit a rest stop up ahead?" he asked, his tone casual but strained. Could use a bathroom break. My gut tightened. Stopping in the middle of nowhere with a stranger felt like tempting fate, but refusing seemed overly paranoid. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. I could grab a soda anyway. A few miles later, a faded sign announced a rest stop, its vending machines and restrooms glowing like lonely sentinels in the dark. I pulled in, the lot deserted, the only sound the wind whistling through the empty picnic tables. Caleb grabbed his backpack and stepped out, his movements quick, almost furtive. "Be right back," he said, heading for the restrooms. I watched him go, the unease growing, then got out to stretch my legs, the night air sharp against my skin. I wandered to the vending machines, fishing for change, the hum of their fluorescent lights a faint comfort. But Caleb was taking too long, far longer than a quick break warranted. My eyes drifted to the restrooms, expecting to see him emerge, but the door remained still, the shadows within unmoving. A prickle of dread crawled up my spine. Had he ditched me? And if so, why? Curiosity and fear warred within me, urging me to check the restroom. I approached, my footsteps loud in the quiet, and called out, "Caleb? You okay?" No response. I pushed open the door, the hinges groaning, the fluorescent lights flickering like a dying pulse. The stalls were empty, the air thick with the tang of bleach and damp tile. Caleb was gone. My heart raced, confusion giving way to alarm. Then I saw it, a scrap of paper wedged under the soap dispenser, its edges frayed. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it, the scrawled words chilling me to the core. "I'm sorry. They're after me. I had to use you as cover. Check your trunk." Ice flooded my veins, the note a grenade in my hands. I sprinted back to the car, my keys slipping in my sweaty grip, and popped the trunk. The sight stole my breath. Stacks of cash, bound in tight bundles, nestled beside a sleek pistol, its metal glinting in the moonlight. My mind reeled, questions colliding like a storm. Who was Caleb? What was this money? And who was chasing him? The roar of engines snapped me back, headlights blazing on the horizon, closing fast. Two black SUVs tore into the lot, their tires screeching, their intent unmistakable. I slammed the trunk, dove into the driver's seat, and gunned the engine, the car lurching onto the highway, my heart pounding in my ears. In the rearview mirror, the SUVs gave chase, their lights filling the night with menace. I pushed the accelerator to the floor, the speedometer climbing past 90, then 100, the engine protesting as I weaved through the sparse traffic. The SUVs matched my pace, relentless, their bulk looming closer with every mile. My knuckles were white on the wheel, my mind a frantic whirl. Was Caleb a thief, a smuggler? Had he planted this in my car to throw off his pursuers? And what would these men do if they caught me? I took an exit at the last second, the car fishtailing as I fought for control, hoping to lose them on the backroads. The SUVs followed, their engines a guttural roar, their pursuit unyielding. The road twisted through a pine forest, the trees a blur of shadow and moonlight. A figure darted into the road ahead, and I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop. It was Caleb, his face pale, his eyes wide with urgency. "Drive!" he shouted, yanking open the passenger door and diving in. I hesitated, rage and fear warring within me, but the screech of tires behind us made the decision. I floored it, the car surging forward as the SUVs closed in. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. my voice shaking with adrenaline. Caleb rummaged in his backpack, pulling out another gun, checking it with a practiced ease that chilled me. "I'm CIA," he said, his eyes scanning the mirrors. "Deep cover. Those guys? They're not the good guys." My mind struggled to process his words, the absurdity clashing with the reality of the chase. "The money, the gun?" I pressed, swerving to avoid a pothole. "Evidence," he said grimly. "Enough to take down a cartel. They found out I was onto them, been hunting me since." A gunshot cracked, the rear window exploding in a shower of glass. Caleb leaned out, returning fire, the muzzle flashed stark in the dark. "There's a safe house 10 miles north," he shouted over the chaos. "If we make it, we're good." I nodded, too focused on the road to argue, the gunfire a relentless drumbeat. Bullets pinged off the car, each one a reminder of how close we were to death. We careened through curves, the suspension groaning, the forest a blur of green and black. Ahead, a bridge loomed, spanning a deep gorge, its far side promising salvation, a cluster of buildings, the safe house. "Almost there," Caleb yelled. "Don't stop." We were halfway across when a deafening explosion rocked the night. In the mirror, one SUV flipped, engulfed in flames, debris raining onto the bridge. The other swerved, crashing into the guardrail, its pursuit ended in a twisted heap. We shot across, skidding to a stop before a nondescript warehouse. Caleb leapt out, shouting codes I couldn't decipher, and armed men poured from the building, surrounding us with practiced efficiency. As the adrenaline drained, the reality of the night crashed over me. I sat, hands still gripping the wheel, my body trembling. Caleb returned, his voice softer now. "You okay?" I nodded numbly, the weight of survival settling in. "What now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Now you're a hero," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "You helped bring down a major operation. But for your safety, you'll need to stay here a bit, till we clean this up." I followed him inside, the door sealing us from the chaos, a strange calm settling over me. In hours, I'd gone from a salesman to a pawn in an international sting, my life upended by a stranger's desperate gambit. The money, the gun, Caleb's truth, they were pieces of a puzzle I'd never fully grasped. But I'd faced death and emerged, my sedan a battered testament to my survival. Whatever lay ahead, questions, safe houses, a life forever changed, I knew I could handle it. I'd already survived the ride of my life, and that was a story no one could take away. Story 6. The moment I saw the blue station wagon creep past our house for the third time, its driver's gaze fixed on my infant daughter in her new pram, a chill sank into my bones, as if the world had tilted into shadow. What began as a thrifty purchase to ease the financial strain of new parenthood had unraveled into a haunting ordeal, transforming a simple act of kindness into a perilous dance with a stranger's grief. In the quiet suburbs of Asheville, North Carolina, one learned that even the most innocent transactions can open doors to nightmares that linger long after the locks are changed. It all started with the relentless arithmetic of parenthood, where every diaper and jar of baby food chipped away at our savings. My husband, David, and I had welcomed our daughter, Lila, 3 months earlier, and the joy of her gummy smiles was tempered by the reality of our tightening budget. A pram was essential, but the sleek models in stores were far beyond our reach. Scouring online marketplaces became my nightly ritual, and one evening, I stumbled across a listing that seemed like a gift from fate. A high-end pram, barely used, offered at a fraction of its retail price. The seller, a woman named Margaret, lived in a nearby neighborhood, and her message was warm, almost maternal. We arranged to meet at her apartment the next afternoon, my heart light with the prospect of a deal that would ease our strain. Margaret's building was in an older part of Asheville, its brick facade weathered but charming, the kind of place where ivy clung to the walls like a living tapestry. I climbed the creaky stairs to her second-floor unit, Lila nestled against my chest in a sling, her soft coos a counterpoint to my growing unease. The hallway was dim, its carpet threadbare, and the air carried a faint tang of mildew, but I brushed it aside, chalking it up to nerves. Margaret greeted me with a smile that radiated warmth, her mid-30s face framed by auburn curls, her eyes soft with a kindness that put me at ease. "Oh, what a darling!" she exclaimed, peering at Lila, her voice thick with affection. "Come in, let's see the pram." Her apartment was a cozy clutter of books and knitted throws, the air scented with lavender and fresh-baked bread. The pram stood in the corner, its sleek frame gleaming, its fabric pristine. Margaret ran her hand along its handle, her touch almost reverent. "My son outgrew it so fast," she said, her smile faltering for a moment, a shadow crossing her eyes. I tested the pram, pushing it back and forth, marveling at its smooth glide, and handed over the cash, a modest stack of bills that felt like a victory. We chatted about motherhood, the sleepless nights, the fleeting joys, and she gifted me a bag of baby clothes, her son's outgrown Onesies folded with care. "I'm glad it's going to a good home," she said as I left, her voice tinged with something I couldn't place, a wistfulness that lingered as I descended the stairs. That evening, as I rocked Lila to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret, "Hope you and Lila got home safe. Enjoy the pram." It was a sweet gesture, if slightly unnecessary, and I replied with a quick thank you, my mind already drifting to the next feeding. But over the following days, subtle disturbances began to erode my peace. A car resembling Margaret's silver hatchback lingered at the end of our street, its driver obscured by tinted windows. At the farmer's market, I caught a glimpse of a woman with auburn curls, her figure vanishing into the crowd when I turned for a second look. I told myself it was coincidence, the fog of new mom exhaustion playing tricks, but the unease grew, a quiet hum beneath the rhythm of our days. Then came the station wagon. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the air heavy with the scent of cut grass, and I was in the front yard, pushing Lila in her pram, her tiny hands waving at the clouds. The blue wagon rolled by, its pace deliberate, the driver a man I didn't recognize staring directly at us. My stomach twisted, but I shook it off, reasoning he was just a neighbor I hadn't met. An hour later, it passed again, the man's gaze unwavering, and when it circled a third time, my heart began to race, a primal alarm sounding in my core. I scooped Lila up and hurried inside, locking the door, the pram abandoned on the lawn, its wheels still in the fading light. That night, I confided in David, my voice trembling as I recounted the car, the market sightings, Margaret's text. "I think someone's watching us," I said, feeling foolish even as the words spilled out. David listened, his brow furrowed, but I saw the skepticism in his eyes. "Clara, you're running on fumes," he said gently, his hand warm on mine. "New parenthood's got us both jumpy. Maybe it's just a weird neighbor." I wanted to believe him, to let his logic soothe the fear gnawing at me, but the next day shattered that hope. Returning from a walk with Lila, I spotted Margaret across the street, half hidden behind a magnolia tree, her eyes fixed on our house. When she saw me notice, she turned and walked away, her pace quick, almost guilty. Now I was certain something was wrong. I called the non-emergency police line, my voice shaking as I described the incidents, but the officer was polite yet dismissive. "Without a clear threat, there's not much we can do," he said. "Keep a log of anything suspicious, and call 911 if you feel unsafe." I started a notebook, jotting down every sighting: the wagon, Margaret's shadow, a strange text from an unknown number, "Your Lila's so precious, those big blue eyes." My nerves frayed with each entry, the constant vigilance turning our home into a fortress. I stopped taking Lila outside unless necessary, triple-checked locks each night, and slept with my phone clutched like a lifeline. David grew concerned, suggesting therapy for postpartum anxiety, but I knew this was real, a threat I could feel in my bones. The truth came on a rainy Thursday night, the kind where the world seemed to huddle under a gray shroud. David was working late, and I was alone with Lila, washing bottles in the kitchen's dim light. The baby monitor crackled, a creak that wasn't Lila's usual stirring, sharp and deliberate. My heart leapt, a cold dread pooling in my chest. I crept upstairs, each step a battle against panic, the monitor's static a sinister hum. As I neared the nursery, I heard whispers, soft but unmistakable, a sound that turned my blood to ice. I peered around the door frame, and the sight froze me: Margaret, leaning over Lila's crib, her hands hovering above my sleeping daughter, her face a mask of longing and pain. "Get away from her!" I screamed, bursting into the room, my voice raw with fury and fear. Margaret whirled, her eyes wide with shock, her hands dropping to her sides. For a moment, we stood locked in silence, the only sound Lila's confused whimpers as she stirred. "I'm sorry," Margaret stammered, her voice trembling, tears glistening on her cheeks. "I didn't mean. I just had to see her." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, stepping between her and the crib, my body a shield. "Why are you in my house? Why have you been following us?" Her shoulders slumped, tears spilling freely now. "My baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I lost my son. Lila, she looks so much like him." The pieces snapped into place: the pristine pram, barely used. The baby clothes, folded with a mother's care. Her fixation on Lila, a mirror of her grief. Pity surged, but fear and anger burned hotter. "You need to leave," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Now, or I'm calling the police." She nodded, her face crumpling, and turned to go, pausing at the door to look back at Lila, her eyes a well of sorrow. I held my ground, my heart pounding, until she was gone, the front door clicking shut behind her. I called the police, cradling Lila as I recounted the intrusion, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. They arrived quickly, taking my statement and promising to track Margaret down. They advised a restraining order, a legal shield against her shadow. In the days that followed, I learned her story. Her son had died 6 months earlier, a crib death that shattered her world. Grief had twisted her, turning Lila into a surrogate for her loss. The man in the station wagon was her cousin, watching from afar, worried for her sanity but unable to stop her descent. The police found her, ensuring she got help, but the details blurred against the weight of my relief. The ordeal left scars, a lingering anxiety that made me jump at shadows, check locks obsessively. We installed a security system, its cameras a cold comfort, and I started therapy, not for postpartum but for the trauma Margaret's intrusion carved into me. Life crept back to normal, but the pram sat unused in the garage, its once bright promise tainted. I thought of Margaret often, hoping she found peace, her grief no longer a threat to my family. Lila grew, her laughter a daily miracle, and I guarded it fiercely, my love tempered by a new wariness. Years later, as I watched Lila chase fireflies in our backyard, her giggles a melody in the summer dusk, I felt the weight of that time, the fear, the violation, but also the strength I had discovered. The pram, a bargain that nearly cost me everything, was a lesson in the fragility of trust, the dangers hidden in kindness. I'd faced a nightmare and emerged, my family intact, my resolve hardened. The world was still beautiful, Lila's joy a testament to that, but I carried a truth now. Sometimes, the greatest threats come wrapped in smiles, and a mother's love must be both tender and fierce, ready for whatever shadows lurk beyond the light. Story 7. The instant I glimpsed Nurse Carla slipping a handful of vials into her satchel, their glass glinting under the sterile glow of the hospital's supply closet, a cold dread coiled in my chest, as if I'd stumbled upon a secret that could unravel lives. What I thought was just another monotonous night shift at Mercy General became the most perilous ordeal of my life, a test of courage that would leave me forever changed. In the quiet corridors of a small-town hospital, I learned that even the most routine jobs can thrust you into a moral crucible, where silence is complicity and action is a gamble with deadly stakes. I'd been a custodian at Mercy General in the sleepy town of Concord, New Hampshire, for just over a year, a job that paid the bills while I figured out what to do with my stalled ambitions. It wasn't glamorous mopping floors, emptying trash cans, scrubbing sinks, but it was steady, and most nights, the hospital's hum was a soothing backdrop to my thoughts. The third-floor corridors, where I spent most of my shifts, were a labyrinth of fluorescent lights and muted beeps, their rhythm broken only by the occasional murmur of nurses or the soft tread of doctors on rounds. I liked the solitude, the chance to let my mind wander as I pushed my cart, its wheels squeaking faintly with each turn. That October night was unseasonably cold, the kind that seeped through the hospital's old windows and made me regret forgetting my jacket. I was shivering as I started my rounds, the cart's clatter echoing in the empty halls, a thermos of coffee my only defense against the chill. Around 3 a.m., as I wiped down a handrail near the supply closet, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Nurse Carla, a veteran of the night shift, was lingering by the closet door, her broad frame tense, her eyes darting like a cornered animal's. Carla was a force tall, imposing, with a reputation for a temper that could clear a room. Most staff gave her a wide berth, but I'd always found her brusque efficiency oddly comforting, a constant in the hospital's chaos. Tonight, though, she was different. Her movements were furtive, her hands unsteady as she fumbled with the lock, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting a shadow to pounce. Curiosity, the treacherous spark, rooted me in place. My rag paused mid-swipe. I edged closer, pretending to focus on a stubborn smudge, my heart picking up a nervous rhythm. When Carla finally opened the door, the closet's dim light revealed shelves of medical supplies, bandages, syringes, and rows of labeled vials. She reached in, her hands swift but deliberate, and began pocketing vials, their contents catching the light like liquid jewels. These weren't bandages or gauze. They were controlled medications, the kind locked away to prevent misuse. My breath caught, a silent gasp trapped in my throat. Was she stealing? Carla, The no-nonsense nurse who barked orders with military precision. The vials disappeared into her satchel, her movements practiced, almost routine. I froze, torn between confronting her and retreating, my mind racing with the implications. Stealing drugs could mean patients going without, doses missed, lives at risk. But Carla was formidable, her temper legendary, and the glint in her eyes as she scanned the hall suggested a desperation I didn't want to cross. I decided to watch, to gather proof before acting, my heart a drumbeat against my ribs. For the rest of my shift, I shadowed her from a distance, my mop prop as I lingered near her rounds. She moved with her usual efficiency, checking charts and administering meds, but every so often, when she thought no one was looking, she'd slip a syringe or vial into her pocket, her hands quick as a magician's. Each theft tightened the knot in my stomach, the weight of what I'd seen pressing harder. By 4 a.m., I saw my chance. She ducked into the supply closet again, the door ajar. I positioned myself nearby, pretending to scrub a scuff mark, my eyes locked on her bulging satchel as she emerged, the vial's outline stark against the fabric. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening despite the fear clawing at me. "Carla," I said, my voice low but steady, stepping into her path. "I saw what you did in there." Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing, a predator sizing up a threat. "What are you talking about, Sam?" she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut. I held her gaze, my knees trembling but my voice firm. "I saw you take the meds. You're stealing from the hospital." For a moment, silence hung between us, thick and electric, her face flushing a dangerous red. Before I could react, she lunged, grabbing my collar with a strength that stole my breath, yanking me close. "You don't know what you're messing with," she hissed, her face inches from mine, her breath hot and sour. "Keep your mouth shut, or you'll wish you had." The hospital's sterile glow seemed to dim, the corridor narrowing to a tunnel of menace. I could feel her volatility, a storm ready to break, and every instinct screamed to back down. But the image of those vials, of patients who might suffer, anchored me. "I'm not letting this go," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. "I have to report it." Her grip tightened, her eyes blazing with a mix of rage and fear, and for a terrifying second, I thought she'd strike me. Then, abruptly, she shoved me back, my shoulder hitting the wall with a dull thud. "You'll regret this," she growled, storming off, her satchel swinging like a pendulum of guilt. I stood there, my chest heaving, the corridor's silence roaring in my ears. The confrontation had shaken me to my core, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. Lives depended on it, faceless patients, their trust betrayed by Carla's theft. For the next hour, I went through my duties in a daze, my mop moving mechanically as I scanned the halls, half expecting Carla to ambush me in a shadowed corner. My mind churned with scenarios. What if she had allies, other staff in on this scheme? What if she came after me outside these walls? The hospital, once a place of quiet routine, now felt like a maze of hidden threats, its fluorescent lights casting long, accusing shadows. As dawn approached, the weight of my decision grew unbearable. I couldn't live with the guilt of inaction, the knowledge that I'd let harm come to those in my care, even indirectly. In the janitorial closet, surrounded by the familiar scent of bleach and pine, I grabbed the phone, my hands trembling as I dialed the emergency line for Dr. Ellison, the hospital's chief of staff. To my relief, she answered, her voice crisp despite the hour. "Dr. Ellison, "It's Sam, from custodial," I said, my words barely above a whisper. "I need to report something serious. Nurse Carla's been stealing meds from the supply closet." There was a pause, heavy with the gravity of my accusation. "That's a grave claim, Sam," she said, her tone measured but urgent. "Are you certain?" I recounted what I'd seen: the vials, Carla's furtive movements, our confrontation, my voice growing steadier as the truth poured out. She listened, her questions sharp and precise, and when I finished, she said, "You did the right thing. Stay where you are. I'm coming down, and we'll handle this together." The wait was agonizing, each creak of the building a potential threat, my eyes darting to the closet door, half expecting Carla to burst through. When Dr. Ellison arrived, flanked by 2 security guards, their faces set with purpose, relief washed over me, though it was tinged with dread. We found Carla in the break room, pouring coffee with a casual air that belied the storm brewing. Her face drained of color when she saw us, the mug slipping from her hands to shatter on the floor. "Carla," Dr. Ellison said, her voice calm but unyielding, "we need to discuss missing medications." What followed was a blur of chaos and revelation. Carla tried to bolt, her satchel clutched tight, but the guards blocked her path, their movements swift and practiced. As they restrained her, the bag fell, spilling vials and syringes across the linoleum, a damning cascade of evidence. Carla's composure shattered. She sobbed, her pleas mingling with threats aimed at me, her voice a raw wound. "You don't understand," she cried, her eyes wild. "I needed the money." The guards led her away, her shouts echoing down the hall, a haunting refrain of desperation and betrayal. Dr. Ellison placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch steadying. "You were brave, Sam," she said, her eyes warm with gratitude. "You may have saved lives tonight." In the days that followed, the hospital unraveled Carla's scheme. She'd been stealing narcotics for months, selling them to feed a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control. New security protocols were implemented, locks tightened, inventories scrutinized. I was commended, my name whispered with respect among the staff, but the praise felt hollow against the trauma of that night. For weeks, I flinched at every shadow, half convinced Carla's contacts might seek revenge, my nights haunted by the memory of her rage. I considered quitting, trading the hospital's sterile halls for a job where the stakes were lower, the dangers mundane. But Dr. Ellison's words echoed, a reminder that my role, however humble, had power. I'd stopped a threat, protected the vulnerable, and that purpose anchored me. I stayed, my mop a quiet weapon in the fight for safety, my eyes sharper now, scanning for the next shadow. Mercy General was more than a workplace, it was a trust, a duty, and I was its guardian, sweeping away not just dirt but the darkness that threatened its heart. Now, months later, as I push my cart through the silent corridors, the squeak of its wheels a familiar hymn, I carry a quiet pride. The hospital is a beacon of healing, but it's also a place where vigilance is a lifeline. I'm not just a custodian, I'm a sentinel, a protector of the unseen, ready to face whatever the midnight shift brings. That night, I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to act despite it, and in the quiet of Concord's hospital, I found a strength I'll carry always, a light against the shadows that lurk in even the safest places. Story 8. The moment that plain manila envelope slid beneath my hostel door, its edges whispering against the worn floorboards, my heart seized, a primal instinct warning that this innocuous scrap held a threat as lethal as a coiled viper. I'd come to Istanbul chasing the dream of a grand adventure, but what began as a vibrant exploration of ancient streets had spiraled into a labyrinth of paranoia and pursuit. In a foreign city where history and danger intertwined, I learned that a single theft could unravel your identity, and a stranger's warning could be the only thread keeping you from a fate you'd never see coming. I'd always yearned to wander the world, to trace the paths of poets and conquerors through cities older than memory. After years of scraping together savings from my barista job in Seattle, I booked a solo trip to Istanbul, envisioning myself lost in the grandeur of the Hagia Sophia or savoring baklava in bustling bazaars. The first few days were a kaleidoscope of wonder, the Bosphorus shimmering under a golden sun, the call to prayer echoing through narrow alleys, the spice market's air thick with saffron and cumin. I roamed with a notebook, sketching domes and minarets, my heart alight with the city's pulse, each moment a brush stroke in a masterpiece of experience. On my fifth night, I returned to my modest hostel in Sultanahmet, my legs weary from a day of climbing Galata Tower and haggling for a silk scarf in the Grand Bazaar. The hostel was a charming jumble of creaky stairs and faded tapestries, its communal kitchen always buzzing with travelers swapping stories. I was fumbling with my room key, my mind replaying the day's delights, when I noticed something amiss. My backpack, which I'd left neatly on the chair, was slumped on the floor, its straps askew. A cold prickle ran down my spine. Had I been careless, or had someone been here? I checked inside, and my stomach plummeted. My wallet, passport, and phone were gone, stolen with a precision that left my clothes and sketchbook untouched. Panic surged, a tidal wave that drowned my exhaustion. I was alone in a foreign country, stripped of identity and means, a stranger in a city of millions. I rushed to the hostel's front desk, my hands trembling as I explained to the manager, a kind-eyed man named Sam, who listened with a furrowed brow. He called the local police, who arrived with notepads and skeptical expressions, their questions sharp but routine. Tourist thefts are common, one officer said, his English halting. Pickpockets, scams. File a report, then visit your embassy tomorrow for a temporary passport. Their words offered little comfort, their tone suggesting my belongings were already lost to Istanbul's underbelly. Sam, sensing my distress, promised to check the hostel's security footage, but his apologetic smile told me not to hope. That night was a torment of sleeplessness, the hostel's thin walls amplifying every creak and murmur. I lay on the lumpy mattress, jumping at shadows, convinced the thief might return, their motives unknown. Was it random, or had I been targeted? The question gnawed at me, a splinter in my mind. At dawn, I dragged myself to the U.S. Embassy, a fortress of bureaucracy in a sleek district far from the old city's charm. The staff were efficient but harried, processing my request with practiced detachment. "It'll take a few days," a clerk said, handing me a form and a small sum of emergency cash. "We've arranged a bed at a budget hostel in Beyoğlu. Stay safe, and don't carry valuables." I nodded, clutching the cash like a lifeline, but the city's vibrancy had dulled, its beauty now laced with menace. The new hostel was a stark contrast to the first bare walls, flickering lights, a lobby that smelled of cheap disinfectant. I settled into my shared room, my few possessions tucked under the bunk, my nerves frayed by the constant hum of uncertainty. The embassy's cash bought me meals, but the loss of my phone and passport left me isolated, cut off from home and the digital tether of safety. I kept to myself, avoiding the other travelers' curious glances, my sketchbook my only solace. But a creeping unease followed me, a sense that eyes lingered too long. At a corner cafe, a man in a dark suit watched me over his tea, his gaze unblinking until I looked away. In the spice market, a woman in a headscarf trailed me through the stalls, her steps mirroring mine until I ducked into a crowd. I told myself it was paranoia, the stress of theft twisting my perceptions, but the feeling clung, a shadow I couldn't shake. Then came the envelope. I'd just returned from another fruitless visit to the embassy, my hope of a quick resolution fading, when I saw it, a plain manila envelope, slipped under my door, unaddressed but deliberate. My hands shook as I picked it up, its weight light but ominous, like a whispered threat. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words scrawled in jagged ink, "Stay away. This is your only warning." My breath caught, the room shrinking to a pinpoint of fear. Stay away from what? Who was watching, and why? The note was a grenade, its meaning unclear but its intent unmistakable. Someone wanted me scared, silenced, gone. I bolted to the front desk, my voice trembling as I showed the note to the clerk, a young woman with tired eyes. "Someone left this in my room," I said, my words spilling out. "I think I'm being followed." She frowned, promising to alert the manager and tighten security, but her tone was practiced, as if soothing anxious travelers was routine. "Stay calm," she said. "It's probably a prank." But her words did nothing to quell the terror churning within me. I returned to my room, barricading the door with a chair, my mind racing. The theft, the watchers, the note, they were connected, a puzzle I couldn't solve but couldn't ignore. Was I a random target, or had I stumbled into something bigger, a web spun in Istanbul's shadows? Sleep was impossible, the hostel's walls paper thin, every footstep in the hall a potential threat. I sat on the bunk, the note clutched in my hand, replaying every moment since the theft. Had I seen something I shouldn't have? A face in the bazaar, a deal in an alley? The city's vibrancy now felt like a mask, its ancient stones hiding secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. I considered fleeing, catching the next bus to Ankara or Izmir, but without a passport, I was trapped, a pawn in a game I didn't understand. The embassy was my only anchor, but even there, I felt exposed, the man in the suit and the woman in the market lingering in my memory like ghosts. At dawn, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in the hostel, a sitting target for whoever was watching. I packed my meager belongings, leaving the note behind like a cursed artifact, and slipped out, the city waking in a haze of pink and gold. I headed for a small guest house I'd heard about, run by a former embassy worker who offered cheap rooms and discretion. The streets were alive with vendors and tourists, but I kept my head down, my scarf pulled tight, every stranger a potential pursuer. At a tram stop, I caught a glimpse of the woman from the market, her headscarf a flash of color in the crowd. My heart raced, and I ducked into an alley, my breath shallow, the city's pulse now a threat. The guest house was a sanctuary, its owner, a grizzled American named Ellen, taking me in without questions. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her eyes sharp but kind. I told her everything, the theft, the watchers, the note, my voice cracking with the weight of it all. She listened, her face hardening, and handed me a burner phone. "Call your embassy contact," she said. "Tell them to expedite your passport and mention a potential threat. They'll take it seriously." I did, my words tumbling out to a surprised clerk who promised to escalate my case. Ellen offered me a room, hidden in the back, and stood watch, her presence a bulwark against the city's menace. The next day, the embassy called my passport was ready, and they'd alerted local police to investigate the note. I collected it, the document a lifeline, and booked a flight home, my adventure cut short but my survival paramount. Ellen drove me to the airport, her silence a comfort, her eyes scanning the road for threats. As Istanbul receded below the plane, its minarets glinting in the sun, I felt a mix of relief and loss. The city had been a dream, then a nightmare, its beauty forever tangled with fear. Back in Seattle, I learned fragments of the truth: a theft ring targeting tourists, possibly linked to a larger network, though details were scarce. The note remained a mystery, its sender a shadow I'd never name. Istanbul changed me, sharpening my edges, teaching me that adventure carries a price. I still sketch, but my lines are harder now, etched with the weight of caution. The city's call lingers, its history a siren song, but I know its shadows too well. I'd faced a faceless threat and emerged, my courage forged in the crucible of fear. The envelop, a fleeting terror, was a lesson: in a city of secrets, survival demands vigilance, and sometimes, the only way out is through the dark, one trembling step at a time. Story 9. The moment I caught the predatory glint in the gas station clerk's eyes, a chill snaked through me, as if the desert night itself had whispered a warning. What began as a routine pit stop on a lonely stretch of Arizona highway spiraled into a heart-pounding flight from a town that seemed to pulse with malice. In the vast, starlit expanse of the Southwest, I learned that some places are not what they seem, and a simple fill-up can become a desperate fight for survival, where the line between stranger and predator blurs in the flicker of a neon sign. I was halfway through a solo road trip from Austin to San Diego, chasing a freelance photography gig that promised to kickstart my career. The open road was my canvas, its endless vistas of cactus and sandstone a balm for my restless spirit. I'd been driving since dawn, my old Jeep humming along Route 93, the desert stretching out like a sea of shadows under a moonless sky. My gas gauge was flirting with empty, and when I spotted the flickering sign for Dust Devil Gas, its neon buzz a lone beacon in the dark, relief washed over me. The station was a relic: peeling paint, rusted pumps, a squat building with grimy windows, but it was open, and that was enough. I pulled into the lot, the gravel crunching under my tires, the air heavy with the scent of dust and creosote. A group of men loitered near the entrance, their silhouettes lean and angular, their laughter sharp and abrupt, like coyotes in the night. Their eyes tracked me as I stepped out, a weight that made my skin prickle, but I brushed it off, chalking it up to the isolation of the desert, where strangers are a curiosity. The clerk behind the counter was a wiry man with a face like weathered leather, his smile thin and unconvincing. "Evening," he said, his voice a low drawl, his gaze lingering too long. "Pumps ready. Cash or card?" "Card," I replied, handing over my debit card, my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. As he swiped it, I glanced outside, noting the men had grown in number, their stares more blatant, their postures tense, like predators circling prey. I focused on the pump's digital display, willing the numbers to climb faster, the nozzle heavy in my hand. The desert was silent save for the hum of the pump and the occasional murmur from the group, their words too low to catch but charged with an intensity that set my nerves alight. Just as I finished, a crunch of gravel behind me made me spin, my heart lurching. The tallest of the men stood there, flanked by two others, their faces shadowed but their intent clear in the tilt of their heads. "You know," the tall man said, his voice a slow, menacing drip, "we don't see many outsiders around here. Folks tend to get lost, if you catch my drift." His words were a blade, slicing through the night stillness, his eyes glinting with a hunger that wasn't human. My pulse hammered, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the gas cap. "Appreciate the heads up," I said, forcing a casual tone, "but I'm just passing through. Gotta hit the road." I moved toward my Jeep, but one of the others stepped forward, his bulk blocking the driver's door, his hand resting on the handle with a deliberate weight. "Now, hold on," he said, his voice thick with mock concern, a grin splitting his face. "Can't let you drive off into the night like that. Why don't you come with us? We'll take real good care of you." His words were a trap, their meaning clear in the way his companions closed in, their movements synchronized, a pact tightening the noose. In that moment, I knew with bone-deep certainty that if I went with them, I'd vanish, another name on a missing persons list, swallowed by the desert's vast indifference. Adrenaline surged, a wildfire in my veins. I shoved past the man, my shoulder slamming into his chest, and dove into the Jeep, slamming the door as hands grabbed for the handle. The key turned, the engine roaring to life, and I floored the gas, tires spinning on the gravel as I peeled out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, the men sprinted to their trucks, the station's neon glow illuminating their fury. The town, little more than a cluster of shacks and boarded storefronts, came alive, lights flicking on, more vehicles joining the chase, their engines a guttural howl in the night. My hands shook on the wheel, the Jeep pushing its limits as I sped through the desert, the road a black ribbon under my headlights. The pursuing trucks were relentless, their beams filling my mirrors, closing the gap with every mile. A sharp ping against the rear fender sent my heart into my throat. Were they shooting? My mind raced, piecing together the nightmare. Was this a robbery gone wrong, or something darker, a town that preyed on travelers, luring them with the promise of gas only to trap them in a web of violence? The men's words echoed, lost, a threat that felt like a promise. I took a sharp turn onto a side road, the Jeep fishtailing as I fought for control, hoping the maze of dirt tracks would shake them. But they knew these roads, their trucks matching my every move, their headlights a constant menace. My gas gauge dipped lower, a cruel reminder that I couldn't outrun them forever. As I crested a ridge, a glimmer of hope appeared, a highway in the distance, its steady stream of traffic a lifeline in the dark. If I could reach it, blend into the flow, I'd be safe. I pushed the Jeep harder, the engine groaning, the desert blurring past in a haze of sand and shadow. The trucks were inches behind now, their shouts audible over the roar, another ping striking the tailgate. The highway was close, the on-ramp a beacon just ahead. With a final burst of speed, I shot onto the ramp, merging into the current of semis and sedans, their headlights a shield against the dark. I weaved through traffic, my breath ragged, my eyes darting to the mirror. The trucks hesitated at the ramp, their beams receding as they realized the chase was lost. Too many witnesses, too much light. I didn't slow down, not until the horizon glowed with the first hints of dawn, the desert yielding to the sprawl of a truck stop, its neon signs a promise of safety. I pulled in, my legs trembling as I stepped out, the Jeep's dents and scratches a testament to the night's terror. The events felt surreal in the morning light, a fevered dream I might have imagined, but the bullet marks on my fender were stark, undeniable. I found a payphone, its receiver cold against my ear, and called the police, my voice shaking as I recounted the chase, the men, the town that seemed to hunt me. The officer listened, his tone skeptical. A whole town of predators sounded like fiction, but he took my statement, promising to investigate. "Dust devil gas, you said?" he asked, and I could almost hear his doubt. "We'll check it out." I waited at the truck stop, surrounded by the chatter of truckers and the clink of coffee mugs, the normalcy a fragile shield against the memory of those eyes, cold and ravenous. The police called later, their report vague. Dust devil gas existed, but the town was a ghost, its buildings empty, no sign of the men or their trucks. I scoured maps, searched online, but found no trace of the place, as if it had vanished into the desert's vastness. The dents in my Jeep remained, a quiet proof of the nightmare, a reminder that it was real, that I'd escaped a fate I'd never fully understand. In the years since, I've kept driving, chasing gigs across the country, but I avoid the lonely stretches after dark, my tank always full before the sun sets. Dust devil gas haunts me, a specter in my rearview mirror, its neon sign a warning I can't unsee. I wonder about the others who stopped there, the ones who didn't escape, their stories buried in the sand. The desert is beautiful, its vastness a siren call, but I know its shadows now, the places where predators wait, disguised as neighbors, their traps as old as the land itself. I survived, but the lesson lingers. Sometimes, a pit stop is a precipice, and the difference between life and death is a full tank and a foot on the gas. Story 10. The moment I heard the faint cry drifting through the twilight pines, a child's voice trembling with pain, my heart urged me to act, to be the savior in a wilderness that promised solitude. But when I saw the boy's eyes bright with a cunning that belied his tears, I knew I'd been ensnared, led not to a rescue but to a trap as old as the forest itself. What began as a quest for peace in the rugged expanse of Montana's Bitterroot Wilderness became a desperate flight for survival, a harrowing lesson that kindness can be a beacon for predators, and the woods hold secrets darker than any shadow. I'd always been drawn to the wild, its untamed beauty a refuge from the clamor of my tech job in Missoula. The stress of endless code and deadlines had frayed my nerves, and when my therapist suggested a solo camping trip, I seized the chance to reconnect with the earth. The Bitterroot Wilderness, with its jagged peaks and emerald valleys, was the perfect escape, a place where I could trade screens for starlight and silence. I packed with care tent, sleeping bag, a map etched with trails I'd memorized and set out at dawn, my boots crunching on the frost-kissed path, the air sharp with the scent of pine and damp moss. For 3 days, I was in my element, hiking through forests of larch and cedar, sleeping to the lullaby of Willow Creek's gentle babble, my soul lighter with each sunrise. On the 4th day, I ventured deeper, lured by a valley I'd spotted on my map, a secluded basin cradled by granite cliffs, its promise of solitude irresistible. The hike was grueling, the trail winding through rocky scree and dense underbrush, but the view was worth it, a meadow ablaze with wildflowers, a stream glinting like a silver thread under the afternoon sun. I was setting up camp, my tent pegs sinking into the soft earth, when a sound pierced the stillness, a cry, faint but unmistakably human, tinged with distress. I froze, straining to hear the forest's chorus of birds and rustling leaves falling silent. There it was again, louder, a child's voice calling for help. Without hesitation, I abandoned my gear and followed the sound, pushing through a thicket of huckleberry bushes, their thorns snagging my jacket. The cries grew clearer, guiding me to a small clearing where a boy, maybe 9, lay sprawled on the ground, clutching his leg. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt and tears, his eyes wide with fear. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, kneeling beside him, my voice gentle to avoid startling him. "Are you okay?" He looked up, his lip trembling. "I fell," he whimpered. "My leg hurts. I can't walk." I scanned the clearing, my heart aching for this lost child. "What's your name?" I asked, my hands hovering over his leg, checking for injury. "Benny," he sniffled, wiping his nose. "Okay, Benny, I'm Rachel. Let's see what's wrong." I examined his leg, relieved to find no obvious breaks, just a swollen ankle, likely a sprain. His clothes suggested he'd been out here a while, the fabric muddy and frayed. "Are your parents nearby?" I asked, my mind racing. "Camping?" He nodded, his eyes darting to the trees. "Yeah, not far. But I got lost. Can you help me find them?" "Of course," I said, offering a reassuring smile. "Can you walk if I help?" He shook his head, his voice small. "It hurts too much." I made a quick decision. Carrying him was the only option. "All right, I'll get you to your family. Just tell me where to go." I lifted him onto my back, his weight lighter than expected, his small arms wrapping tightly around my neck. He pointed vaguely north, his directions hazy but urgent, and we set off, the sun dipping below the peaks, casting long shadows across the forest floor. As we walked, a nagging unease began to grow. Benny's directions led us deeper into the wilderness, away from the trails I'd mapped, the terrain growing wilder, more isolated. The forest seemed to close in, its pines looming like silent sentinels, their branches knitting a canopy that choked the fading light. My headlamp's beam cut through the dusk, creating eerie shadows that danced on the trunks. I tried to engage Benny, asking about his family, but his answers were vague, his voice oddly cheerful despite his supposed pain. "They're just up ahead," he said, his tone too bright, too rehearsed. After an hour, a faint glow pierced the trees, not the warm flicker of a campfire, but the harsh, yellow light of a window. Relief surged, then faltered as the source came into view, a ramshackle cabin, its logs weathered to a sickly gray, its roof sagging under years of neglect. The light spilled from a grimy pane, its glow more menacing than inviting. "Is this your camp?" I asked, skepticism creeping into my voice, my grip tightening on Benny's legs. "Yep," he chirped, his cheer unnerving. "You can put me down now. I can walk from here." Alarm bells rang in my head, loud and insistent. I set him down, watching as he scampered toward the cabin with an agility that mocked his earlier limp. Before I could process the betrayal, the door burst open, and 3 men emerged, their silhouettes hulking in the dim light. One called out, "Nice work, Benny. Get inside." The boy darted behind them, vanishing into the cabin's gloom, his role as bait now painfully clear. My heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat, as the men advanced, their faces shadowed but their intent unmistakable. "Well, now," the largest said, his voice a low growl, his eyes glinting like a wolf's in the firelight. "Looks like Benny brought us a visitor. Why don't you step inside? We're mighty hospitable." His grin was a slash of menace, his companions spreading out to flank me, their movements a choreographed threat. I took a step back, my boots sinking into the soft earth, my mind racing for an escape. "I'm good," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "My friends are expecting me back at camp. They'll come looking. It was a lie, but I prayed it sounded convincing. The leader's laugh was a harsh bark, echoing through the clearing. "Oh, darling, you're a long way from any camp. Ain't no one coming for you." He lunged, his hand closing around my wrist like a vice, his strength crushing. I yanked back, but his grip held, his companions closing in, one flashing a knife, its blade catching the cabin's light. Panic surged, a wildfire in my veins, and I acted on instinct, driving my knee into his groin with all my force. He doubled over, cursing, his grip loosening, and I wrenched free, sprinting into the forest, branches whipping my face, the underbrush tearing at my legs. Their shouts followed, a chorus of rage, their footsteps crashing through the pines, heavy and relentless. I ran blindly, my headlamp's beam bouncing wildly, the forest a maze of shadow and snag. My lungs burned, each breath a knife in my chest, but fear was a merciless driver, pushing me beyond exhaustion. The men's voices grew closer, their flashlight beams slicing through the dark, grazing the edges of my path. I veered left, then right, desperate to lose them, when the ground vanished beneath me. I tumbled down a steep embankment, rocks and roots clawing at my skin, landing with a jolt in a shallow ravine, pain flaring but drowned by adrenaline. The sound of rushing water reached my ears, a creek, hidden in the gloom. Without thinking, I plunged in, the icy current shocking my senses, sweeping me downstream. I fought to keep my head above water, the cold numbing my limbs, the men's shouts fading as the creek carried me away. Their beams danced on the bank, their curses growing distant, their pursuit thwarted by the water's swift embrace. I don't know how long I was in the creek, minutes, hours, time dissolved in the blur of survival. Finally, half frozen and gasping, I dragged myself onto a muddy bank, my body trembling, my clothes sodden and torn. I lay there, shivering, the forest's night sounds, crickets, whined a fragile reassurance that I'd escaped. But I was lost, my gear abandoned, my body battered, and the men were still out there, their cabin a festering wound in the wilderness. I forced myself to my feet, the pain in my arm and legs a dull roar, and began to walk, using the stars to orient myself, their cold light a faint guide. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sent my heart racing, my body poised to dive for cover. The forest was a paradox, beautiful yet treacherous, its serenity a mask for the horrors I'd uncovered. Dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, and with it came a sound that brought tears to my eyes, the distant rumble of an engine, a vehicle on a road. I pushed toward it, my legs leaden, the trees parting to reveal a two-lane highway, its asphalt a lifeline in the wild. I flagged down a pickup, its driver an older woman with a weathered face eyeing me warily as I stumbled into view, my clothes torn, my face streaked with mud and blood. "Please," I gasped, "I need help." "There are men in the woods," they tried to. My voice broke, the words too heavy to finish. She nodded, her expression softening, and opened the passenger door. "Get in, hon. We're going to the sheriff." At the Bitterroot County Sheriff's Office, I poured out my story, the cry, Benny, the cabin, the chase, my voice raw but steady, fueled by the need to expose the truth. The deputies listened, their faces shifting from skepticism to grim recognition as I described the cabin's location and the men's faces. "Sounds like the Harlow brothers," one said, his pen pausing over his notepad. "They're a bad lot, living off-grid, rumored to be into trafficking or worse. Your statement's the first solid lead we've had." They dispatched a team to the coordinates I'd given, but when they returned, Their report was chilling. The cabin was empty, stripped bare, the men and Benny gone, as if they'd dissolved into the forest's depths. I recovered in a Missoula motel, my body healing but my mind haunted by the what-ifs. Had I been moments slower, less lucky, I might have been another victim, another ghost in the Bitterroot's shadows. The police kept searching, but the Harlows remained elusive, their trap a fleeting nightmare I'd barely escaped. The experience reshaped me, etching caution into my bones. I still camp, but never alone, always with a partner and a plan shared with those waiting. The wilderness is my heart's home, its beauty undimmed, but I know its dangers now. The predators who wear children's faces, the traps hidden in cries for help. Benny's eyes, bright with deception, linger in my dreams, a reminder that kindness can be a lure, and the line between savior and prey is razor thin. I survived Willow Creek, but its lesson endures. In the wild, trust is a gamble, and the forest's silence hides more than peace. It harbors hunters, waiting for the unwary to answer their call. Story 11. The moment I caught the desk clerk's trembling fingers as he handed me the room key, his eyes darting with a fear that mirrored my own unease, a cold certainty gripped me. I'd made a grave mistake checking into the Twilight Lodge. What was meant to be a romantic escape with my partner had twisted into a waking nightmare, a labyrinth of locked doors and lurking predators. In the fog-choked hills of West Virginia, I learned that some havens are traps, their promises of rest a lure for the unwary, and survival demands a courage forged in the crucible of terror. It had been a year since Caleb and I started dating, our love a bright thread woven through the grind of our teaching jobs in Pittsburgh. With summer break looming, we craved a retreat, a chance to reconnect away from lesson plans and faculty meetings. A last-minute deal on a travel site caught my eye, a quaint motel nestled in the Allegheny foothills, its website boasting cozy rooms and scenic trails. The Twilight Lodge had sparse reviews, but the photos of rustic charm and misty vistas were irresistible, and we booked a long weekend, our hearts light with anticipation. "It'll be our adventure," Caleb said, his grin infectious as we packed our bags, unaware of the darkness waiting to swallow us. The drive was longer than expected, the highway giving way to winding backroads that twisted through dense forests, their canopies blotting out the sun. By the time we reached the lodge, night had fallen, a thick fog rolling in to cloak the world in a ghostly shroud. The building loomed like a specter, its weathered clapboard facade barely visible under the dim glow of a flickering vacancy sign. The parking lot was a patchwork of cracked asphalt, our Jeep's tires crunching over scattered leaves. "Talk about moody," Caleb said, his voice tinged with unease, though he squeezed my hand, his warmth a fleeting anchor. I nodded, forcing a smile, but the air felt heavy, charged with a menace I couldn't name. The lobby was a time capsule of faded grandeur, peeling wallpaper in garish gold, a threadbare rug, and a chandelier that flickered with every gust of wind through the cracked windows. The air was thick with the musty scent of old wood and damp linen, a faint undercurrent of something sour, like forgotten fruit. Behind the desk stood a thin man, his face pale and pinched, his eyes darting as if expecting a shadow to leap from the corners. "Welcome to the Twilight Lodge," he murmured, his voice barely audible, his hands trembling as he typed our names into a clunky computer. "You're the only guests tonight. Is everything okay?" I asked, my concern sharpening as I noticed his sweat-slicked brow. He glanced up, fear flashing in his eyes for a heartbeat before he masked it with a brittle smile. "Just a long shift," he said, his words unconvincing. He slid a key across the counter, its brass tarnished, attached to a plastic tag marked Room 9. As our fingers brushed, he pressed something into my palm, a scrap of paper, folded tight, his movements swift and covert. Before I could react, he turned away, busying himself with a stack of forms, his shoulders hunched as if bracing for a blow. Confused, I pocketed the paper, my unease growing, and led Caleb down a dimly lit corridor, the floorboards creaking under our steps. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant drip of a faucet, each sound amplifying the sense that we were being watched. Room 9 was at the hall's end, its door warped and heavy, groaning as we pushed it open. The interior was a stark betrayal of the website's promises: sagging furniture draped in faded chintz, a carpet stained with mysterious blotches, a bare bulb casting harsh shadows across peeling walls. The air was stale, heavy with mildew, and the single window was sealed shut, its glass clouded with grime. "Maybe we should find another place," Caleb said, wrinkling his nose at the musty odor, his usual optimism faltering. I was about to agree when I remembered the paper. I unfolded it under the bulb's glare, my heart lurching at the scrawled words: "Don't sleep. Don't shower. Leave now." Caleb's eyes widened as he read over my shoulder, his face paling. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, his voice tight with fear. I shook my head, my pulse racing. "We need to go," I said, grabbing our bags, the note a burning weight in my hand. I yanked at the door, but it wouldn't budge, the knob turning uselessly in my grip. I threw my shoulder against it, panic rising, but it held fast, as if sealed by an unseen force. Caleb tried the window, his hands straining against the frame, but it was immovable, the glass too thick to break without a tool we didn't have. The realization hit like a blow: we were trapped. Before we could strategize, footsteps echoed in the corridor, slow and deliberate, stopping just outside our door. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating, then a key scraped in the lock, each turn a countdown to dread. The door swung open, revealing a towering man with a face like carved granite, his eyes cold and unyielding. Behind him stood two others, their bulk filling the doorway, their expressions a mix of menace and anticipation. Well, the leader said, his voice a low rumble, his lips curling into a cruel smirk. "Got ourselves some new guests." I stepped in front of Caleb, my heart pounding, my voice shaking but defiant. "What do you want?" The man's smile widened, a predator savoring the hunt. "Want? You came to us, didn't you? Checked in all nice and legal. This is our place, and you're our entertainment." His words were a gut punch, their implication chilling. This wasn't a random assault but a calculated trap, the lodge a facade for something monstrous. Caleb's hand found mine, his grip tight, his voice trembling but resolute. "Please, let us go," he said. "We won't tell anyone, we swear." The man laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "Oh, we know you won't," he said, his tone mocking. "No one ever does." They advanced, their boots thudding on the carpet, and I knew we had seconds to act. Desperation fueled me. I grabbed the bedside lamp, its base heavy with tarnished brass, and swung it with all my strength, the metal connecting with the nearest man's temple. He staggered, clutching his face, a howl of pain breaking the silence. "Run!" I shouted, shoving past the stunned men, pulling Caleb with me. We sprinted down the corridor, the walls a blur of faded gold, the men's shouts and pounding footsteps close behind. The lobby was deserted, the clerk gone, his absence a silent betrayal. We burst through the front doors into the fog, the cold air a shock to our lungs, our Jeep a beacon in the mist. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, the men's shouts growing louder, their silhouettes emerging from the lodge like specters. Caleb dove into the passenger seat, his breath ragged. Just as I turned the ignition, a hand smashed through the driver's window, fingers clawing at my throat. I screamed, stomping the gas, the Jeep lurching forward, the hand slipping away as we sped into the night. In the rearview mirror, the men's figures shrank, swallowed by the fog, their rage a fading echo against the engine's roar. We drove for hours, the fog a suffocating veil, our eyes darting to every shadow, every set of headlights a potential threat. When dawn broke, painting the hills in hues of amber and rose, we pulled into a bustling diner, its neon sign a promise of safety. The warmth of coffee and the chatter of truckers grounded us, but the terror clung, a weight we couldn't shed. What was that place? Caleb asked, his voice hoarse, his hands trembling around his mug. I shook my head, the note's warning burned into my memory. I don't know, but we're calling the police. The local sheriff's office was a squat building in a nearby town, its officers listening with growing unease as we recounted our ordeal, the clerk's fear, the note, the men's attack. Their skepticism softened as we described the lodge's details, their faces hardening with recognition. There've been whispers about that place for years, one deputy said, his pen pausing over his notepad. Missing travelers, strange stories, but no hard evidence. A raid was organized, and days later, we learned the truth. The Twilight Lodge was a front for a trafficking ring, its hidden rooms a grim testament to countless victims. The men had vanished, the clerk missing, the operation dismantled, but its architects elusive, ghosts in the Allegheny mist. Caleb and I tried to rebuild, but the lodge's shadow lingered, fracturing our sleep with nightmares, our trust in the world eroded. The strain of that night, the terror we'd shared, strained our bond, and we parted ways months later, our love a casualty of trauma. I moved to a new city, but the sight of a motel sign, its neon flicker, a siren call still sends a shiver down my spine, a reminder of the clerk's desperate warning, his fleeting act of courage. Was he a victim too, or complicit, silenced for his defiance? I'll never know. The Twilight Lodge taught me that evil can wear the face of hospitality, that a bargain can be a baited hook. I still travel, but with eyes sharpened by caution, my heart guarded against the lure of easy promises. That weekend, meant for love, became a crucible, forging a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The fog may have lifted, but its lessons endure. Some doors, once opened, lead only to darkness, and the price of checking in can be your very survival. Story 12. The moment I heard the click of the door locking behind me, a cold certainty gripped my heart. This wasn't a routine pizza delivery, but a descent into a nightmare where a stranger's desperation would test the limits of my courage. The man's wild eyes, glinting with a feverish intensity, told me I'd stumbled into something far darker than a late-night craving, and the muffled cries from upstairs confirmed it. In the quiet suburbs of Hollow Pines, Oregon, I learned that a simple job could thrust you into a life-or-death struggle, where a single act of defiance could mean salvation or doom for a captive soul. I'd been delivering for Tony's Pizzeria for 7 months, a gig that kept my bank account afloat while I studied for my nursing degree. It wasn't glamorous hauling pizzas through rain-soaked streets, dodging traffic for meager tips, but it was steady, and the rhythm of the road suited my restless spirit. That October night was quiet, the kind where the town seemed to hold its breath. The streets empty save for the occasional flicker of porch lights. I was ready to clock out, my shift dragging, when a last-minute order pinged through the app, a delivery to a house on the edge of Hollow Pines, where the suburbs gave way to tangled woods and gravel lanes. The promise of a tip, however slim, was enough to keep me going, so I grabbed the pizza, its warmth seeping through the insulated bag, and headed out, the radio humming a soft jazz tune against the night's chill. The address 1127 Cedar Lane was in a part of town I rarely visited, a cluster of older homes swallowed by overgrown hedges and sagging fences. The road narrowed as I drove, the street lights fading, the woods pressing close, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The house loomed at the end of a rutted driveway, a two-story relic with peeling paint and windows dark save for a single flickering bulb above the porch. The air was thick with a scent of pine and damp earth, a faint tang of neglect that set my nerves on edge. I parked, the Jeep's engine ticking as it cooled, and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my sneakers, the pizza box a flimsy shield against the night's eerie quiet. I rang the doorbell, its chime echoing inside, a hollow sound that seemed to linger too long. After a moment, footsteps approached, jerky, uneven, and the door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 40s, his hair disheveled, his face shadowed by a patchy beard. His eyes were wild, darting past me to scan the darkness, then settling on my face with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Tony's Pizza," I said, forcing a smile, my voice steadier than I felt. "That'll be $16.50. He nodded, his movements twitchy, and gestured inside. Come in," he said, his voice a hoarse rasp. "Got the cash in here." Every instinct screamed to stay put, to hand over the pizza and leave, but company policy and the hope of a tip pushed me forward. I stepped inside, the door slamming shut behind me with a thud that echoed in my chest. The lock clicked, a sharp, final sound, and I froze, my grip tightening on the pizza box. The house was a maze of clutter-stacked boxes, sagging furniture, the air heavy with the stench of stale cigarettes and something acrid, like burnt metal. A single lamp cast long shadows, making the walls seem to pulse with hidden threats. "Just wait there," the man said, disappearing into a side room, his footsteps uneven, as if he were limping. I stood in the entryway, my heart pounding, my eyes scanning the chaos. Faded photos hung crookedly, their subjects' faces blurred by time, and a pile of unopened mail spilled across a table, the air thick with neglect. Then, a sound from upstairs, a muffled cry, sharp and desperate, unmistakably human. My breath caught, the pizza box trembling in my hands. The man returned, not with money but with a revolver, its barrel glinting in the lamplight, his grin a twisted slash of triumph. "Now," he said, his voice eerily calm, "you're gonna do exactly what I say." I raised my hands, the pizza box hitting the floor with a dull thud, sauce smearing across the warped boards. "Please," I said, my voice shaking but steady, "I don't want trouble. Take my wallet, the car, whatever. Just let me go." He laughed, a grating sound that scraped my nerves. "It's too late for that, kid," he said, his eyes gleaming with a manic fervor. "You're part of this now." He gestured with the gun, motioning me deeper into the house, his posture rigid with control. My mind raced, searching for an escape, but the gun's cold promise kept me moving, my sneakers scuffing on the grimy floor. We passed through a kitchen, its counters buried under dirty dishes, the air thick with the reek of rot. Another cry echoed from above, louder now, a woman's voice pleading for help. My stomach churned, the reality of the situation crashing over me. Someone was trapped, and I'd walked into the heart of their prison. What was that? I demanded, my fear giving way to a surge of adrenaline. The man's face darkened, his grip on the gun tightening. Nothing, he snapped. Just the TV. Now move. But I wasn't buying it. The cry came again, raw and urgent, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. There's someone up there, I said, stepping toward the stairs, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. They need help. He moved faster than I expected, blocking my path, the gun inches from my chest. You're not going anywhere, he growled, all pretense of calm gone. Stay put, or you're done. The cry rang out again, clearer now. Help, please. And his eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. My heart pounded, a primal urge to act overriding my fear. I had to do something, or I'd be complicit in whatever horror he was hiding. In a burst of desperation, I acted, hurling the pizza box at his face, the hot cheese and sauce splattering across his eyes. He stumbled back, cursing, his hands clawing at his face, the gun wavering. I seized the moment, bolting for the door, my fingers fumbling with the lock, precious seconds slipping away. His footsteps thundered behind me, his rage a palpable force, and just as I grasped the knob, he tackled me, sending us crashing to the floor. Pain seared through my side, my breath knocked out, but I fought, my grease-slicked hand slipping as I pushed against him. You don't understand, he panted, his face inches from mine, his breath sour. They'll kill her if anyone finds out. Another scream from upstairs, desperate and clear, gave me the strength I needed. I drove my knee into his stomach, the impact jarring, and his grip loosened, his body doubling over. I scrambled free, my legs shaky but driven, and sprinted up the stairs, the cries guiding me like a beacon. The hallway was dark, a sliver of light spilling from under a door at the end. I threw my shoulder against it, the wood splintering, and burst into a room that would haunt me forever. A woman, bound to a chair, her face bruised and tear-streaked, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. Please, she gasped, her voice raw, help me. I didn't hesitate, my fingers tearing at the ropes binding her wrists, the knots tight and unyielding. The man's footsteps pounded up the stairs, his curses a rising tide, his shadow filling the doorway just as the last knot gave way. She stood, her legs trembling, clinging to me for support. We have to jump, I said, pointing to the window, the only escape from the trap closing around us. She nodded, her eyes fierce with determination, and we moved as one, rushing to the glass. I shoved it open, the frame groaning, and we leapt, the night air whipping past as we fell, landing hard in the overgrown yard below, pain flaring but drowned by adrenaline. We staggered to our feet, her hand gripping mine, and ran, the man's enraged shouts fading as we plunged into the woods. Branches clawed at our faces, the ground uneven, but we didn't stop, driven by the need to survive. After what felt like miles, we stumbled onto a gas station, its neon glow a sanctuary in the dark. The attendant, a grizzled man with kind eyes, took one look at our battered forms and called the police, his voice steady as he relayed our location. We collapsed in the fluorescent light, the woman, her name was Ellie, sobbing with relief, her hand never leaving mine. The police arrived in a flurry of sirens, their questions sharp but thorough. Ellie had been kidnapped by her ex-husband, a man unhinged by paranoia, convinced shadowy enemies were closing in. He'd held her for 10 days, his delusion spiraling into violence. I was hailed as a hero, my name splashed across local news, but the title felt heavy, unearned. I'd acted on instinct, driven by a cry I couldn't ignore, a chance alignment of fate that put me in that house at the right moment. The man was arrested, his house a trove of evidence, but the ordeal left scars, nightmares of his wild eyes, the weight of Ellie's gratitude, a reminder of how close we'd come to death. I kept delivering for Tony's, though each darkened house, each unfamiliar driveway, now carried a whisper of fear. Ellie's words in the hospital haunted me, "You were my angel," coming when I'd lost hope. They anchored me, a reminder that even a pizza run could change a life. I drove with sharper eyes, my heart a little harder, my courage tempered by the knowledge that danger can lurk behind any door. Hollow Pines was still my home, its quiet streets a canvas of normalcy, but I knew its shadows now, the places where cries go unheard. I'd faced a monster and saved a life, and that truth, heavy as it was a light I carried into every delivery, a beacon against the dark. Story 13. The moment I glimpsed the sleek, deadly outline of a pistol hidden beneath the driver's seat, its metal catching the street light's glow, a cold dread surged through me, as if I'd unearthed a curse buried in the heart of my new car. What I thought was a steal, a cherry red 1966 Mustang at a price too good to be true, had become a death sentence, thrusting me into the crosshairs of men who'd kill to reclaim their secrets. In the quiet streets of Albuquerque, New Mexico, I learned that a bargain can be a baited hook, and the open road can lead straight to a fight for survival. I'd been saving for years, every spare dime from my barista shifts tucked away for my first car, a symbol of freedom after a childhood tethered to buses and borrowed rides. At 22, I was ready to claim the road, and when I found the Mustang's listing on a local online marketplace, my heart raced with possibility. The photos showed a classic beauty, its curves gleaming, its chrome polished to a mirror shine. The seller, a man named Vince, was smooth over the phone, his voice warm with a salesman's charm, answering my questions about mileage and maintenance with practiced ease. "She's a gem," he said, "just needs a new home." We agreed to meet at a garage on the city's outskirts, a spot he claimed was his workshop, and I drove out in my friend's borrowed hatchback, my savings a crisp stack of bills burning a hole in my pocket. The garage was a squat building on a dusty lot, its sign faded, the air thick with the tang of motor oil and hot asphalt. The Mustang sat in the open bay, its red paint a beacon under the midday sun, far more stunning than the photos had promised. Vince greeted me with a broad grin, his frame wiry, his handshake firm but fleeting. "She's a beef, ain't she?" he said, patting the hood, his eyes scanning the lot as if expecting company. I circled the car, trying to seem savvy despite my limited knowledge, checking tires and peering under the hood while Vince spun tales of its history, a careful owner, a light touch, a reluctant sale due to hard times. His story rang true enough, and the test drive sealed it, the engine's throaty purr, the smooth shift of gears, the road unspooling like a dream. I handed over the cash, my hands trembling with excitement, and signed the paperwork, the keys now mine, the Mustang a promise of new horizons. Driving home, I was weightless, the wind whipping through the open windows, the radio blaring a classic rock anthem. Neighbors gawked as I pulled into my apartment complex, the Mustang a jewel in the cracked asphalt lot. I spent the evening basking in my triumph, polishing the chrome, imagining road trips to the Grand Canyon or the Pacific Coast. It wasn't until I adjusted the driver's seat, searching for the perfect angle, that the dream cracked. A tear in the upholstery caught my eye, and beneath it, something glinted cold, metallic. My fingers brushed against it, and my heart stopped as I pulled out a pistol, its weight heavy, its barrel a silent threat. My mind reeled. Was this Vince's oversight, a forgotten relic, or something far worse? Before I could process the discovery, a screech of tires shattered the quiet. I peered through my apartment window, my breath catching as a black SUV pulled up, its tinted windows opaque, two men in dark jackets stepping out. Their movements were deliberate, their hands hovering near their waists, suggesting concealed weapons. My pulse hammered, the gun a burning weight in my lap. A sharp knock on the door jolted me, a gruff voice barking, "Open up! We know you're in there." I froze, the pistol trembling in my hands, my mind racing. Who were they? What did they want? The Mustang, the gun, it was all connected. A puzzle I'd unwittingly claimed with my purchase. The knocking grew insistent, a pounding that shook the frame. "Last chance." The voice growled, followed by the splinter of wood as they began to force the door. Panic surged, a wildfire in my veins. I couldn't stay, not with these men closing in, their intent clear in the violence of their approach. I slipped the gun into my jacket, its weight a grim anchor, and darted to the back door, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. The front door groaned under their assault, and I sprinted to the Mustang, the keys slipping in my sweaty grip. The engine roared to life, a defiant growl, and I peeled out of the lot, tires screeching, the SUV's headlights flaring in my rearview mirror as the men scrambled to pursue. The chase was on, the streets of Albuquerque a blur of neon and shadow. I pushed the Mustang to its limits, the speedometer climbing past 80, then 90, the engines roared drowning out my fear. The SUV was relentless, its bulk looming closer, its driver weaving through traffic with a precision that spoke of experience. My knuckles were white on the wheel, my mind a frantic whirl. Had Vince set me up, using the car to offload his troubles? I swerved onto a side street, the Mustang's tires gripping the asphalt, hoping to lose them in the city's maze, but they matched my every turn, their headlights a constant menace. As I raced through a quiet neighborhood, a thought struck: there was more to this than the gun. I reached into the seat's tier, my fingers brushing against something else, small and hard, wrapped in cloth. I pulled it out, nearly veering off the road as I glimpsed a USB drive, its plastic casing unassuming but heavy with implication. This was what they wanted, a digital key to secrets worth killing for. A bullet pinged off the rear bumper, a sharp crack that sent my heart into my throat. They were shooting now, their patience gone, their intent lethal. I needed a plan, a way to shake them before the Mustang or I ran out of fight. Ahead loomed the industrial district, a sprawl of warehouses and empty lots, its narrow streets a labyrinth that might give me an edge. I took the exit hard, the car fishtailing, the SUV inches behind, its horn a blaring threat. I wove through the district's alleys, taking turns at random, the warehouses looming like silent giants, their shadows swallowing my headlights. The SUV stayed close, its driver relentless, but desperation was my ally, pushing me to risks they couldn't match. As I rounded a corner, my heart sank. A chain-link fence blocked the road, its barbed wire glinting under the street lights, a dead end. The SUV screeched to a stop behind me, cutting off retreat, the men piling out, guns drawn, their faces twisted with triumph. "End of the line, kid," one shouted, his voice a snarl. "Hand over the drive, and we might let you walk." I clutched the USB, Its weight a decision, my eyes scanning for any escape. The men advanced, their shadows long and menacing, and I knew surrender wasn't an option, not with the gun in my jacket, the drive in my hand, the lives tied to whatever secrets it held. I revved the engine, the Mustang's roar a defiant challenge, and made my choice. Hold on, I muttered to myself, flooring the gas, the car surging toward the fence. The men fired, bullets pinging off the hood, the windshield cracking but holding. The Mustang hit the fence at full speed, the metal groaning, then giving way in a shower of sparks. I burst through, the car bouncing onto a vacant lot, the men's shouts fading as I swerved onto a side street, the SUV struggling to follow through the wreckage. I didn't stop, driving until the city gave way to open desert, the horizon glowing with dawn's first light. I pulled into a 24-hour diner, its neon sign a haven, and collapsed into a booth, the USB and gun hidden in my jacket, their weight a constant reminder of the night's terror. The waitress, her name tag reading Doris, poured me coffee I wouldn't drink, her kind eyes noting my trembling hands but asking no questions. I sat there, the drive burning a hole in my pocket, my mind wrestling with what to do. The police? But what if these men had connections, their reach deeper than I could fathom? The drive was a Pandora's box, data, evidence, something worth killing for, and I was its unwitting keeper. As the sun rose, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson, I made my choice. I couldn't go home, not yet, not with the men still out there, their faces etched in my memory. The Mustang, battered but unbowed, was my lifeline, its engine a promise of escape. I needed answers, to know what I'd stumbled into, to protect myself and anyone else tied to the drive's secrets. I paid for the coffee, my hand steadier now, and slid back into the driver's seat, the gun and drive tucked close. The road stretched ahead, endless and uncertain, but I was ready, or as ready as I could be. The Mustang's purr was a call to battle, and I answered, driving into the dawn, knowing my life had changed forever, a fugitive in a war I hadn't chosen but would fight to survive. Story 14. The moment I heard the low murmur of voices echoing through the cavernous halls of the abandoned Crestwood factory, a shiver of unease rippled through me, as if the rusted machinery itself had whispered a warning. What I thought was a mundane night shift as a security guard became a heart-pounding plunge into a secret operation that threatened to swallow me whole. In the shadowed outskirts of Erie, Pennsylvania, I discovered that even the emptiest places can harbor deadly secrets, and a single step into the unknown can transform a quiet job into a fight for survival. I'd been working as a night guard at the Crestwood factory for 6 months, a gig that suited my introverted nature and gave me time to tinker with my sci-fi novel. The pay was decent, the hours predictable, and the solitude was a gift most nights. My biggest challenge was staying awake through the long, quiet rounds. The factory was a relic of Erie's industrial heyday, its sprawling complex of brick and steel left to decay after the company shuttered a decade ago. Its halls were a maze of silent machinery, their gears frozen in time, the air heavy with the scent of oil and rust. I'd grown accustomed to its creaks and groans, the way the wind whistled through broken windows, creating a symphony of ghosts that kept me company. That October night was colder than usual, the chill seeping through the factory's cracked walls, my breath visible under the beam of my flashlight. I started my rounds at 2 a.m., my boots echoing in the vast emptiness, the thermos of coffee in my cart a lifeline against the creeping fatigue. The routine was second nature: check the perimeter, sweep the main floor, ensure the gates were locked. But as I moved through the production wing, a faint sound stopped me cold. It was a voice, low and urgent, drifting from the far end of the building, where the old storage rooms lay shrouded in shadow. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a trick of the wind or a stray animal rustling in the dark, but as I crept closer, the sound sharpened, definitely human, definitely deliberate. My heart quickened, a nervous rhythm against the factory's silence. In all my months here, I'd never encountered another soul after hours. Vandals, maybe? Teens looking for a thrill? I switched off my flashlight, the darkness swallowing me, and edged toward the sound, my senses heightened, every creak of the floor a potential betrayal. A faint glow seeped from under a storage room door, its light harsh and unnatural, not the flicker of a trespasser's phone but something steadier, more purposeful. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear, the voices now clear-clipped, professional, discussing shipments and deadlines with a precision that chilled me. This wasn't a prank or a party. It was something organized, something wrong. I reached for my radio, ready to call for backup, my thumb hovering over the button, when the voices grew louder, footsteps approaching the door. Panic surged, a cold wave that locked my joints. The hallway was bare, no crates or shadows to hide me, the nearest alcove yards away. I ducked into a shallow recess, pressing my body against the cold brick, my breath shallow, my flashlight clutched like a weapon. The door swung open, and two men emerged, their dark clothing blending with the gloom, duffel bags slung over their shoulders, their voices taut with urgency. "We gotta move faster," one said, his tone sharp. "Boss wants this out by dawn." "Relax," the other replied, his voice calmer but edged with menace. "No one comes here. We've got time." As they passed, mere feet from my hiding spot, the door hung ajar, offering a glimpse inside. My eyes widened, shock rooting me in place. Tables lined the room, covered in white powder, scales, and neatly stacked packages, the air thick with a chemical tang. It was a drug lab, hidden in the factory's forgotten heart, a secret operation thriving under the cover of abandonment. My mind raced. Call the police, gather evidence, or get out before they saw me? I was still debating when a sharp gasp broke the silence. I turned, my heart lurching, to see one of the men staring right at me, his face a mask of fury and surprise. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice a gunshot in the quiet. "What the hell are you doing here?" I didn't wait for an answer. I bolted, my boots pounding the concrete, the men's shouts echoing behind me, their footsteps heavy and relentless. The factory's maze, once familiar, became a disorienting trap, its corridors twisting into dead ends and shadowed corners. I sprinted through the production area, weaving between rusted conveyors and looming presses, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly, my lungs burning with each ragged breath. "He's the night guard," one yelled, his voice close, too close. "Don't let him out." I ducked behind a massive lathe, my body trembling, my mind scrambling for a way to the exit, its glowing sign a distant promise of freedom. Their voices grew louder, their flashlight beams slicing through the dark, grazing the edges of my hiding spot. I fumbled for my phone, praying for a signal, but the factory's thick walls mocked me with a blank screen. The exit was across the floor, a straight shot but exposed, a gauntlet I'd have to run. As I crouched, a hand clamped onto my shoulder, yanking me back. I spun, instinct taking over, and swung my flashlight, the heavy metal connecting with the man's jaw. He stumbled, cursing, blood trickling from his lip, and I seized the moment, sprinting toward the exit, my heart a frantic drumbeat. More figures emerged from the shadows, their silhouettes blocking the door, their guns glinting in the dim light. "Nowhere to run, buddy," one snarled, his grin cruel. "Should have minded your own business." I skidded to a stop, my eyes darting for an escape, and spotted it an old freight elevator, its rusted cage a gamble but my only chance. I lunged, slamming the button, praying it still worked. The doors groaned open, a miracle in the chaos, and I dove inside, the men's shouts rising as the doors closed, their fists pounding the metal. The elevator shuddered upward, its cables creaking, carrying me to the roof, a temporary reprieve. I caught my breath, the cold night air a shock as the doors opened, the city's lights twinkling below like distant stars. The men's voices echoed from the stairwell, their footsteps climbing fast they'd found the elevator's path. I ran to the roof's edge, the wind whipping my jacket, and scanned for a way down. A fire escape, its metal rusted but intact, clung to the building's side, a precarious lifeline. I swung onto it, the stairs creaking under my weight, and descended as fast as I dared, each step a prayer against collapse. Halfway down, their beams caught me, their shouts piercing the night. "He's on the escape," one yelled, and I pushed harder, my hands burning against the cold metal. The ground was close, the chain link fence surrounding the factory looming ahead, its barbed wire a final barrier. I jumped the last few feet, landing hard, pain shooting through my ankles, but adrenaline kept me moving. The men were on the escape now, their boots clanging, their guns a promise of death. I sprinted for the fence, spotting a gap where the mesh had pulled away from a post, a narrow chance at freedom. I threw myself at it, the metal tearing at my clothes, my skin, but I squeezed through, tumbling onto the other side, the open lot a canvas of escape. I ran, the factory's shadow receding, the men's shouts fading as I reached a main road, the glow of a street light a beacon of safety. Gasping, I pulled out my phone, the signal weak but enough, and dialed 911. "Please," I panted, my voice raw, "there's a drug lab at the Crestwood factory. They're armed, they're after me." The operator's calm questions grounded me, and within minutes, police cars roared into view, their lights a blazing shield. I collapsed against a curb, my body aching, my mind reeling as I recounted the night, the voices, the lab, the chase, each word a weight lifted. The police raided the factory at dawn, finding evidence of a massive drug operation, chemicals, cash, and enough product to flood the region. Several arrests were made, the men's faces matching my descriptions, their operation shattered by my accidental discovery. The detectives called me a hero, my actions credited with cracking one of Erie's biggest cases, but the title felt hollow against the trauma that lingered. My ribs ached, my hands were scraped raw, and the memory of those guns, their barrels glinting, haunted my sleep. I thought of quitting, trading the factory's shadows for a safer job, but the knowledge that I'd made a difference disrupted a poison spreading through the city kept me going. Crestwood was shut down, its gates chained, but I took a new post at a warehouse, my flashlight now a tool of vigilance, my rounds a silent vow to stay alert. The novel I wrote gained a new edge, its pages infused with the terror and triumph of that night. I'd faced death and emerged, a reluctant hero forged in the factory's dark heart, and that truth, heavy as it was, fueled me forward, a light against the shadows that lurk in even the emptiest places. Story 15. The moment I stepped into the warm glow of the old farmhouse, its porch light a flickering beacon against the storm's fury, A fleeting relief washed over me, only to be snuffed out by the chilling glint in the old man's eyes. What began as a desperate search for shelter on a rain-soaked Nebraska backroad became a harrowing descent into a predator's lair, where the promise of safety was a cruel illusion. In the heart of a tempest, I learned that some refuges are traps, and the kindness of a stranger can mask a darkness that threatens to consume you whole. I was halfway through a cross-country drive from Chicago to Denver, chasing a new job as a graphic designer, a chance to reinvent myself after a stagnant year. The road had been my companion for 2 days, its endless asphalt and open skies a canvas for my dreams. But as I crossed into Nebraska, the weather turned treacherous, dark clouds rolling in like an advancing army, unleashing a downpour that blurred the world beyond my windshield. The rain hammered my aging sedan, the wipers struggling to keep up, and I slowed to a crawl, my knuckles white on the wheel, the highway's edges lost in the deluge. Then, a jolt, a deafening crack of thunder startled me, my hands jerking the wheel. The car skidded on the slick pavement, spinning once before lurching to a stop on the shoulder, the engine coughing and dying. I turned the key again and again, but it was silent, a lifeless husk stranded in the storm. Panic clawed at my chest as I checked my phone. No signal, the screen mocking me with its blank bars. I was miles from the last town, surrounded by sodden fields and twisted trees, the rain a relentless curtain that trapped me in its grip. I sat there, the storm's roar a mocking symphony, weighing my options: stay in the car and hope for a passerby, or brave the deluge to find help. A faint light in the distance pierced the gloom, a pinprick of hope against the sheets of rain. It was a house, its silhouette weathered but sturdy, nestled among a grove of gnarled elms. I grabbed my backpack, pulling my hood tight against the wind, and stepped into the storm, the cold rain soaking me instantly, my boots sinking into the muddy earth. The trek was a slog, each step a battle against the gale, but the light grew stronger, resolving into a porch lamp that flickered like a lighthouse in the tempest. The house was old, its clapboard siding chipped and gray, but its windows glowed with a warmth that promised refuge. I climbed the creaky porch steps, my heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and apprehension. Knocking on a stranger's door at midnight was a gamble, but the alternative was a night in a dead car, exposed to the storm's wrath. I knocked, the sound swallowed by the wind, and waited, shivering, my clothes clinging like a second skin. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, and the door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 60s, his face etched with deep lines, his eyes sharp and unyielding, like shards of flint. "Lost your way?" he asked, his voice gravelly, his gaze raking over me, taking in my drenched state. I nodded, my teeth chattering. "My car broke down," I said, shouting over the storm. "Can I use your phone to call for help?" He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "Can't leave you to drown out there." Relief flooded me as I crossed the threshold, the door thudding shut, muffling the storm's roar. "I'm Lena," I said, dripping onto a faded rug, the warmth of the house a stark contrast to the chill in my bones. "Thank you, Mr. Hank," he replied, his smile thin, barely touching his eyes. The interior was a cluttered shrine to another era: stacks of yellowed newspapers, furniture worn to a dull sheen, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and dust. "Phone's in the parlor," he said, leading me through a maze of boxes and knickknacks. "Storm might have knocked out the lines, but you're welcome to try. Get dried off first, though. I'll fetch a towel." He disappeared down a hall, and I stood in the parlor, my unease growing despite the warmth. The house felt alive, its creaks and groans a chorus of hidden eyes, watching, waiting. Hank returned with a towel and a flannel shirt, his movements slow but deliberate. "These were my nieces," he said, his voice flat. "She don't come around no more." I thanked him, my gratitude tinged with suspicion. His eyes lingered too long, his words carrying a weight I couldn't decipher. I changed in a cramped bathroom, the mirror reflecting my pale, wary face, the flannel shirt smelling faintly of mothballs and regret. As I emerged, a sound from upstairs froze me, a thump, followed by a muffled cry, faint but unmistakably human. My heart lurched, the towel slipping from my hands. "Hank?" I called, my voice trembling. No answer. The cry came again, a woman's voice, choked with fear, and I knew it wasn't the storm or my imagination. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I crept toward the staircase, each step a battle against the dread pulling in my gut, the house's shadows closing in like a trap. The parlor's phone, an ancient rotary model, sat silent on a side table, its cord frayed, but I didn't trust it, not with that cry echoing in my ears. I climbed the stairs, the wood groaning under my weight, the air growing colder, heavier, as if the house itself resisted my intrusion. The hallway above was dark, lined with closed doors, the cry emanating from the one at the end, its knob glinting in the dim light. I reached for it, my hand shaking, when a grip like iron clamped onto my shoulder. I spun, my breath catching, to find Hank, his face no longer kind but a mask of menace, his eyes burning with a cold fury. "Didn't your mama teach you not to snoop?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You shouldn't be up here, Lena." I tried to pull away, but his strength was unyielding, his fingers digging into my flesh. "I heard someone," I stammered, my voice cracking. "She needs help." His grip tightened, his smile a grotesque slash. "You heard wrong," he said, his tone a blade. "Now, let's go back downstairs, nice and easy." But the cry came again, sharper, a plea that ignited a fire in my chest. I couldn't let this go, couldn't be complicit in whatever horror he was hiding. With a surge of desperation, I drove my elbow into his ribs, the impact jarring, and he grunted, his hold loosening. I broke free, sprinting for the door, my heart pounding as I threw it open. The room was a prison, its walls bare save for a single bulb casting a sickly glow. A woman, bound to a chair, her face bruised and tear-streaked, looked up, her eyes wide with hope and terror. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw. I lunged for her, my fingers tearing at the ropes, but Hank's footsteps thundered behind me, his shadow filling the doorway. "You're making a big mistake," he roared, a knife flashing in his hand, its blade catching the light. I freed the woman's wrists, her hands trembling as she clung to me, and we backed toward the window, the only escape from the closing trap. I shoved it open, the frame splintering, and helped her through, the storm's icy rain a shock against our skin. Hank lunged, his knife slicing the air, but I kicked out, catching his knee, and he stumbled, cursing. We jumped, landing hard in the muddy yard, pain flaring but drowned by adrenaline. We ran, the rain a blinding curtain, the woods a chaotic refuge of branches and shadow. Hank's shouts faded, the storm swallowing his pursuit, but we didn't stop, driven by the need to survive. Hours later, we stumbled into a small town, its lights a beacon through the deluge. and flagged down a police cruiser, the officer's face shifting from surprise to urgency as we spilled our story. The woman, Claire, had been kidnapped by Hank, a serial predator who lured stranded travelers with the promise of shelter, holding them captive in his farmhouse of horrors. The police raided the property, finding evidence of multiple victims' hidden rooms, chains, a ledger of names that chilled me to the bone. Hank was gone, vanished into the storm, but the house was a tomb of secrets, its walls whispering of those who hadn't escaped. Claire and I were hailed as survivors, our story a grim headline, but the victory was hollow, shadowed by the knowledge of how close we'd come to joining the lost. I made it to Denver, but the job felt distant, a dream overshadowed by the storm's legacy. The farmhouse haunted me, its porch light a false promise burned into my memory. I became cautious, my trust in strangers eroded, my drives confined to daylight, my phone always charged. Claire's gratitude, her tearful embrace at the station, was a lifeline, a reminder that I'd saved a life, but the cost was a piece of my peace. The storm had passed, but its lessons lingered. Some shelters are snares, and the road, however open, can lead to shadows where predators wait, their smiles as treacherous as the rain.